our relationship still didn't grow. It still didn't. It wasn't the main focus. Now looking back, it wasn't his main focus, you know. And I see now that the way that my father parented me and my siblings, his main responsibility that he saw, that he felt he had, was just to provide. And you see that with many men out there today, you know. But I saw that firsthand in my father. And
so you didn't have a close relationship with him?
No, not at all. And in Philippines, you know, for so many years you could, you know, say that excuse, oh, you know, he worked abroad, understandably, because, you know, there's not much out here in Philippines. But when we moved to America, still there wasn't anything. So at that point, it's like, okay, Dad, you know, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
You know, it's a part of my life that I'm just now starting to even come into terms with. I'm like, okay, that really happened. I can't run away from this anymore.
Did you block it out of your memory for a while?
I did. I tried to, at least, but I couldn't. And whenever the memories will pop up, I'm like, man, am I always going to run away from this? Is there ever going to be an opportunity where this is going to be handled, this is going to be dealt with?
Did your parents know about it? What was going on, or
not then?
I
don't
later
know.
On, or?
I don't even know if they did. You know, I brought it up a few months ago when my family came here to San Antonio.
Oh, so just recent. That's very recent.
It's recent, you know, so it's still fresh.
Yes,
the way that it was brought up. Yeah, looking back how my mind was, you know, so perverted.
Corrupted,
bro. It was so corrupted, bro. I remember, man, being in 6th grade in middle school, I was already lusting on women, on these young girls. You know what I mean? And I thought that was okay. I really thought that, okay, this is just who I am, you know? And I'm like, God, help me. All the times I'm praying these prayers, my flesh is wanting the opposite. And though I'm torn, I could feel God's guidance. I could feel his protection over my life, you know, that kept me pure throughout. To some extent,
right?
Pure,
Yes, yeah.
You know, throughout high school, you know, I tried to rebel, you know, and it led me astray. I remember I would just be in my room; it was just dark, and man, I was filled with so much depression, so much darkness in there, and thoughts of suicide started rolling in.
Oh wow!
You know, and It was, I was such in a depressive state, you know, that all my friends had the same spirit. We all just mingled together, just all depressed bunch of teenagers, you know, after high school. We're all trying to find our way in life. You know, I remember there's a parking lot that we parked the rental in, and immediately we could hear music. I look up like this in the building behind me, and I see this big old window and naked women. You know, they're just having a party, just dancing around. You know what I mean? And my boy was like, okay, that's the place. Okay, that's the place. And so we go in. I'm like, man, you know what? It is what it is. I'm in Europe, you know. So what Jesus says at this point, I'm going to do what I want to do. You know, all these years.
I'm on vacation.
Yeah. And so vacation spiritually too. You know, I could just pick it up later on. Man, but yeah, I followed through with it. That's where I lost my virginity, man. Oh, man. That's where it was. And I remember it was, man, just even, I remember when I first shared this story to my wife, man, I never experienced panic attacks, bro. But in that moment that I was sharing to my wife, I had one. Like, I could see, and then depression came back stronger. Darkness, it was just glooming over me even stronger when we started fornicating. And it came to a point where later on in our dating months, I was like, man, I can't do this. You know what I mean? I got tired of it. You know, I got tired of being depressed. I got tired of being robbed of the joy and the peace that God had. I would get so much sleep paralysis in those months. It's not even funny. It was almost like every other night.
Oh my goodness.
I would wake up in the middle of the night. It was just, I couldn't move, you know, and I grabbed my broomstick and I started smashing it right in front of her. She closed the door on me. She didn't want to see that. You know what I mean? I was just there, It was in that moment, it really shocked me. I'm like, man, I didn't know I could rage like that. Because
you never done that before?
all these years, all my friends, oh, you're one of the most chill people. You talk so chill too. You from California, and it just so happened I get stationed in California, And so that really shocked me that I have the capability to rage out like that, especially in front of my wife. I try to do all of this tactics, strategies to kick off this habit, but I couldn't find the willpower out of me to just walk out of it. I kept going back into watching, but in that moment, that season, that's when I really found deliverance.
Yeah, that's when you finally broke that bondage.
Yeah, and it makes me see now that when it comes to deliverance, a person really has to want it.
Yeah, of course.
You know what I mean? The person
Absolutely.
really has to want it. And a person who's struggling with an addiction, who keeps finding his way or her way back into it, is just be honest with yourself. You want to do it. You know what I mean? Because if you really didn't, you know what I mean? God is willing to help you. He'll give you the strength to walk away from that. In that moment, that's where I experienced deliverance. I can still remember what Pastor preached. He was preaching about having a foundation built on Jesus, and everything was speaking into my life in that
Timely
moment.
message.
It was so timely, I tell you, because, being in a new state, being a new, trying to pursue God now. I just left the military. I don't even know what job I'm going to do next. I had HVAC lined up, but I didn't even have that already working for me yet. You know what I mean? There's so many uncertainty up ahead, and yet there's this sermon that says, whatever it is, build your life on Jesus. Man, it spoke so loudly in my heart because
Praise
leading up, even before we left California, I was like, God, I really need a church that you want for us.
Welcome back to another episode of LifeSpeaksPodcast.com. Thank you so much for joining us. We want to give a shout out to the Choosing Hope Foundation. Go to the website, choosinghopefoundation.org. See what they're doing over there, man. Wrapped around prison ministries, just doing big things out there. Check it out if you want to donate, or if you just want to see, or if you just want to just check it out and see what can happen. Hey, just see it, see what can happen. Check out LifeSpeaksPodcast.com and be up on the info about our podcast. And thank you so much for watching. If you want to donate, you have an option on there. Next, the Potter's House, GRA.com with our church, the Universal Church in Universal City, Greater Randolph area, 2025 Universal City Boulevard. Come and check us out, see how God's moving. Let's check out the website. Once again, it's thepottersHouseGRA.com. And, man, just see how God is just moving over there. And it is awesome. Like, subscribe to our podcast, ring the bell so you get all the notifications. And thank you so much for joining us.
Welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Daniel. I'm here with my gorgeous wife, Liz.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us today. Today we have another good episode for you.
Yes.
We're joined by my brother Glad over here.
All the way from Live Oak.
Thanks for joining us.
Yes,
We're
sir.
excited to get into your life story.
Yes.
I think you came into the church, about a year ago?
Yeah. It's about a year ago, 2022 in April, I believe.
Okay.
March or April.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, we've talked and stuff, but I don't really know much about you,
Right.
to be honest. So when you sent me your list, I was like, oh, there's a lot I don't know. I'm kind of excited to get into yours and your wife's testimonies.
Yeah.
So we'll just jump right into it. So we'll just go back to your childhood, kind of talk about your family life, what that was like, and yeah, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. Sounds exciting, bro. Yeah, well, I grew up in Philippines, man. Born and raised there. And I was 10 years old when we moved to America. But so for the majority of my childhood was there in Philippines.
Oh, okay.
And a lot of the things that I saw, the place, the setting, the way of living, all of that is still fresh on my mind. And every now and then, now that I'm a lot older, it catches me off guard. It's like, man, those things are still there, and it feels like a different world to me.
Yeah.
You know, seeing how my life is now, seeing all the people that are in my life now, and then thinking about all of those memories in the back of my mind, I'm like, wow. You know,
What part of the
praise
Philippines were you from?
I was, it's a place called Pampanga.
Is it a big city or is it a small town?
It's a
Kinda
small, well, it's a province, Pampanga. And inside Pampanga is a town called, or more like a county, it's called Arayat. And specifically, the town is called Gatchawin. And that's a very small town. And I lived, that place is right at the bottom of a mountain. So there were a lot of farming. It's a third world country, you know.
Yeah, they have a bunch of political government type of drama, right? Like, did you see that growing up?
I always heard the discussions, you know, when I started to really figure out what's going on. We had a female president who was always being accused for corruption, you know, and I feel like that's one of the main things that really plagued the politics there in Philippines is the corruption of money, you know, all the way back from the 80s. I don't know if you guys know her, but Ferdinand Marcos's wife, I forget her name, but she became like famous out there and internationally famous for being corrupt. Like she had all these shoes, all these dresses.
Yes, and they were like really expensive and just everything. And you hear all these other people are starving, and she has okay.
So your home life, did you have siblings?
I did. I had two older siblings, so I'm actually the youngest.
Okay.
I have an oldest sister and a middle brother.
And how much older are they?
A few years apart. So my sister, I think she's 5 years away from me, and then my brother is 2 or 3 years away from me.
Okay. So did you, being that your siblings were older, so they were probably around 15 or so, you guys left, did your sister experience anything, or your siblings experience?
Like
more
on
than
their
you?
end? Yeah, man, I know. I could just imagine the stuff that they went through, you know, going through that switch, because they're in the middle of their, you know, teenage years, you know, where, you know, you're going through so much in your body, in your mind, you know, you're starting to ask questions in life. And then next thing you know, this big switch happens.
Go ahead, sorry.
To me, I think the transition was a little smoother. You know, I was in 4th grade when I came to America. And, you know, the school was so different. You know, one thing that I did see, though, in my sister was the social aspect of being in school, especially for a young teenage girl. You know, the pressure of being in a new place, in a new high school, you know, and all the things that go on, not just for a new foreign student, but just in general, the students in high school, you know.
And your father, was he around? Your mom and your dad?
Not
together?
growing up. So in Philippines, I was raised by my mother,
Okay.
while my dad worked abroad.
Okay.
I don't know
Was
if
he
you
in
guys...
America? Was he in America at the time?
He wasn't.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, he was. He was in America, but he kind of moved around from Middle East to America. But for the most part, he was here in America.
And so were they still married? He was just working abroad or what? Okay.
He was they stayed married. They're still married.
Oh, good.
I don't know if you guys were there for our revival, but Pastor Roger was kind of mentioning the culture that they saw over there in Sri Lanka, and it reminded me of our culture in Philippines, where, you know, the dad typically flies away to a different country and works abroad, and in that way they provide. You know, that's very common over there in Philippines as well.
Because it's hard to survive in the Philippines.
Yes, very.
Okay, so then I'm assuming that's why you guys left. That was the goal, is to
bring
find
you
a better
guys
life.
Yeah, to have a better life. That's exactly what my parents, their main motive was when they brought us to America. Better opportunities, so many more doors than there in Philippines.
Was it hard for you guys migrating to America, or like what was that whole experience? Do you remember?
It was. I mean, there were difficult years, definitely. Part of me was I was torn apart from my family. You know, in Philippines we have big families, man. Like we have titas, titos, we have a bunch of cousins. You know, everybody was there. And so when we moved to America, all of a sudden it's just me, my parents, and my siblings. And all the holidays, man, there would be torture because I was kind of a kid where I enjoyed community. I enjoyed to be in a family that I feel like I belong, you know. And when I was torn apart from that, you know, man, it really sucked. There was one Christmas where my parents are pretty closed off. So when we did go to America, they didn't even, you know, try to build a community around our lives. You know, they stayed to themselves. And so I remember this one Christmas, I was probably 10 or 11. We were in this one apartment there in New Jersey. And, man, we weren't doing anything. It was me, my brother, my sister. We were just stuck in our rooms on Christmas Day. And my dad and my mom, they're just there too. And I was going all over our apartment saying, "This is the worst Christmas. This is the worst Christmas." And I was just a kid, just like chanting or like rebelling, you know. This is the worst Christmas ever.
Where are my cousins? Yeah.
And I think I vexed my dad at that point, and he was like, "Okay." I think he understood a little bit. He took us out the house and brought us to a party that had all his friends and their family friends. And so that was the transition that I saw. You know, one aspect of it.
So did you Americanize pretty easy? I mean, you were young, you were 10.
Yeah.
Like, did you, over a couple of years, were you like, you're straight American? Or was that cultural shift, was it hard for you? Were you kind of weirded out by American culture? Like, what was that all about? Because I would imagine, with you saying that your dad was abroad, I would imagine your dad's a hard worker.
Yeah.
He probably focused on work, right?
Yeah.
So,
pretty much.
So I'm sure he probably had certain expectations for his kids, right? So how was that kind of cultural shift for you as a young man?
I think I transitioned into this culture pretty smoothly, you know, because I came in 4th grade and then 5th grade. And 6th grade is really where I started to see the shift. You know, I started to build friendship with other people. You know, I got into basketball, I got into sports, you know, and I started to really have friends that we would go to the park together. And through that, you know, I began to learn how people lived over here. I began to learn how, you know, your friends come over your house. Because I remember, I think it was 5th grade, I had this one friend, his name's Peter. And nobody really liked him. He was kind of that one weird friend. If Peter, for some reason you find this, I'm sorry, bro. But that's just how. Anyways. But, yeah, and I remember there's one school day. He just came up to me, like 5th grade, and he was like, "Hey, can I come over your house?" And I'm like, I was taken aback by that. I was like, "To do what?" You know what I mean? For what? I mean, there's nothing in my house. Like, even the way we furnished our house was so minimal. It was not Americanized at all, you know. And so part of having friends in my house, I felt kind of, okay, this is probably weird for them, you know. And so when he asked me that, I was like, man, I don't even know what he's gonna do, but I said yes anyways, you know. And so he came over one day. I think it was a Saturday morning. His parents dropped him off, and yeah, we were just there. Like, we didn't even do anything crazy or anything like that.
How was it since your dad was working, you know, overseas and stuff like that, and then he brings you to America? How was that being spending more time with your dad? How was that for you guys?
It was good. I think my dad, because of the way he worked and his life was mainly work, you know, our relationship still didn't grow. It still didn't. It wasn't the main focus. Now looking back, it wasn't his main focus, you know, and I see now that the way that my father parented me and my siblings, his main responsibility that he saw, that he felt he had, was just to provide. And you see that with many men out there today, you know, but I saw that firsthand in my father. And
so you didn't have a close relationship with him?
No, not at all. And in Philippines, you know, for so many years you could, say that excuse. Oh, he worked abroad, understandably, because there's not much out here in Philippines. But when we moved to America, still there wasn't anything. So at that point, it's like, okay, Dad, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
That seems to be a commonality between immigrants. You see that through a lot of people who come from other countries, and the parents are just solely focused on working and providing and that kind of stuff. And you kind of see that relationship disconnect.
Yeah.
So it kind of seems like you fell into that. So you close with your mom?
I'm close with my mom, yeah.
Did she work too, or was she more of, I'm going to keep the house, I'm going to make sure everything's in order? So is she more around?
Yeah, she worked too.
She did.
Yeah, in Philippines, she didn't. That's where we kind of started to build our bond with our mother. And but when we moved to America, she started working. I think my dad needed extra help financially. And so that's why my mom worked.
So how was that? Because now it wasn't, did you have an idea of like how it would be, we're going with Dad, and then it just not like work out that way? Like, were you just like, did you ever think that? Or no, you're just like, just along for the ride?
Yeah, I think I was just along for the ride at that point, that time and age. I wasn't really thinking about, okay, I'm lacking this in my life. Up until I became a father myself. That's when I started to really see, like, okay, in this time of my life, I could have really used a father. I could have really used a mother, but yet they were at work, they were doing their things, trying to keep things, afloat.
And so this was in New Jersey that you guys migrated to, or is it somewhere else?
Yeah, that was in New Jersey.
Okay. And so, so how was that? When New Jersey and that New York, that kind of Northeast America is really distinct from the rest of America. Like, you guys jumped right into, the people out there are pretty different, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm sure, like, how was it growing up and going to school and stuff? Did you start to pick up their habits and the way they talk and kind of the, you always hear that they're all aggressive, you know what I mean? Like, they don't care about anybody else. Yeah.
I don't,
Did you start to pick that up, or?
I don't think I'm as straightforward as East Coast people. You could ask my wife, but I don't think I am. But there's some certain accents I think I picked up, like the way I say water. Pastor always says it. Oh, glass says water. That's a New Jersey way, I guess. Yeah.
That's right. Okay, so on your list you say sexually abused. So was that in the Philippines, or was that when you came to America?
Yeah, that was in Philippines.
How old were you?
Man, I was young, bro. I was probably 5 or 6, and it wasn't just one event. It was throughout the years of me living there in Philippines.
Was it a family member?
It was within the family. And not just in the immediate family, extended in the cousins and stuff like that, and it's some of the, it's a part of my life that I'm just now starting to even come into terms with. I'm like, okay, that really happened. I can't run away from this anymore.
Did you block it out of your memory for a while?
I did. I tried to, at least, but I couldn't. And whenever the memories will pop up, I'm like, man, am I always going to run away from this? Is there ever going to be an opportunity where this is going to be handled, this is going to be dealt with?
Did your parents know about it? What was going on, or?
Not then.
It was
I
until
don't
later
know.
on, or?
I don't even know if they did. I brought it up a few months ago when my family came here to San Antonio.
Oh, so just recent. That's very recent.
It's recent, so it's still fresh.
Yes,
The way that it was brought up, it's fresh right now, and there's things that are still mending, and relationships I'm praying to reconcile,
So what did your family think when you brought it up just recently? Were they blown away?
They thought I was crazy.
Really?
Oh, you just being kids. That's a big red flag. That was a big red flag for me.
Yeah.
That's not cool.
Yeah, I was like, no, that's not kids being kids. Kids ain't supposed to experience that type of stuff.
Yeah.
So at the time that this was happening, did you know that it was wrong? Were you kind of like, this is kind of weird, what's going on?
I knew it wasn't right, but I didn't know how wrong it was, the full scale of it, and the way that it was introduced to me, I started to partake in it. You know, I remember there was this one time we were in a town where my family resided in, and we were just hanging out at my grandmother's house, and all the parents were there just hanging out. Sunday afternoon, I believe, and all the kids running around together. And my older cousins, they all were like, "Oh, let's go to so and so's house," you know, and no one was there because the parents were in grandma's house. So it was an empty house. And I remember as such a little kid, I was just tagging along with all the big kids.
Yeah.
You know, and then we go into this house and I see that everybody started pairing up, going into doors and closing the doors behind them. And I'm like, what's going on? And I remember I tried to go in, but I think it was one of my siblings that were like, no, you're too young for this, you know? And so I remember that happening, man. And that stuff stayed with me up until now, you know? And I saw that growing up, thinking, okay, I can do the same thing. You know, from being violated to a violator. You know, that's a pattern that you see in many cases. You know, and that's something that, you know, I pray, you know, that some of the things that I was a part of, you know, that those people found healing, that those people found, you know, some type of relationship with God. You know, and it's crazy because some of the people that were there, some of the younger cousins, you know.
Even younger than you.
Younger than me, you know, I see on social media years ago, like, man, why is she dressed up like a boy? Why is she dressed up like
the consequences,
this?
yeah.
And I'm like, man, I wonder if I had a part in that. You know, I wonder if those moments, you know, she's dealing with. And I talked to my siblings about it. And when I exposed it, I had to expose it. You know what I mean? And now my son is up and old. He's getting a lot older now, and that's not something I want my son to see or experience, you know. And I had to expose it and try to find some healing because, you know, I care about my siblings. And I think back, and I could only imagine what happened to them.
Yes.
You know, who, and even before that, all my cousins. How did this thing start?
Yeah.
Someone had to start this pattern.
I was going to say, is that something that's just kind of culturally prevalent in the Philippines, or do you think it was just isolated with your family for some reason? Like you're saying, like somebody along the line started this and it kind of just expanded within your family.
Not that I know of culturally, and I wouldn't be shocked if it was. I wouldn't be shocked if it was. All I knew was it was in the family, and that's as far as I could, you know, collect with my memory.
So this went on for a while then? I mean,
yeah.
Okay.
This went on for a while. And, yeah, so growing up, it really twisted my perspective in a lot of things.
Like what?
You know, and so when I moved to America, and, you know, 4th grade into middle school, you know, 4th grade, 5th grade, and then going into middle school, you know, your puberty years, you know, your body starts changing, you know, or you go to school and your friends are some of the most ungodly people out there, you know, and they start sharing some things and you're exposed to that stuff. And so at that age, I was introduced to pornography. And that's one thing that I battled for so many years.
As a teenager?
As a teenager, yeah. A young teen. I wasn't even a teenager yet.
Oh, wow.
And then going into my teenage years, it heightened, you know. And so I look back now, I'm like, man, it's the way, the things that were child abduction.
Yeah.
Talk
Amber
about.
alert.
But, yeah, looking back how my mind was, you know, so perverted.
Corrupted, yeah.
Bro, it was so corrupted, bro. I remember, man, being in 6th grade in middle school. I was already lusting on women, on these young girls. You know what I mean? And I thought that was okay. I really thought that, okay, this is just who I am, you know? And You know, and so I had a very corrupted mind when it came to girls. And it started, you know, there in Philippines. I remember there's this one neighbor of mine. She was about my age, and whenever we would play outside, you know, we would kind of single each other out. And then I don't know how it happened, man. There was some kind of communication. It's all spiritual.
Right. Yes.
The
yes,
same
yes.
spirits operating. They know how to tangle themselves together. And so I just remember being with this one girl there in Philippines, and we would hide behind a tree every now and then whenever we play outside, because all the kids in Philippines, we just played outside. There was no Nintendo and none of that. And so we will find ourselves behind trees touching each other. You know what I mean? And so I'm like, man, for me to get to that point, you know, and whenever I would get into contact with a female friend, you know, that would always be my motive, to try to gratify the desire of the flesh.
And so when you came to America and you tried that with the girls there, did that work or?
That didn't work because, one, I was still trying to, I was trying to, I mean, I didn't even know how to speak English, Daniel. Come on, man. I couldn't spit game like that, bro. That's funny, bro. But no, I fell in the category of a very quiet foreign exchange student.
Okay.
You know, but in my mind, that's where I was in.
You just had a perverted mind. You're looking at all the girls. Did you lose your virginity young? Like with
I did not actually.
No?
I did not. I lost my virginity after high school.
Okay.
And that's one thing that, you know, throughout high school, man, I was, you know, though I knew Jesus, you know, it's one thing that the environment I was in, you know, everybody losing their virginity. All your boys are talking about their experiences, girlfriend this, girlfriend that. You know what I mean? I'm here even just trying to get a girlfriend, you know. And it came to a point where I'm like, God, I think you're really just trying to protect me. You know, I think God, I look back at those years, you know, God was really trying to protect me from digging a bigger hole.
Did you have any godly upbringing or anything like that? Did you guys go to church?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. My mom raised us up in church over there in Philippines. And so even throughout all of this, you know, I always had a church background. My mom was saved when she was a teenager. And I remember, I think I was 5 or 6 when she first brought us to the church there. And such a young kid, I still had my hands in hers as she led us into the church that we, you know, ultimately got planted in. And I still remember, you know, my mom at home, she would sit me down. And I tell this story to a lot of people. She would sit me down. She would open up the Word of God while my older siblings are out there playing around. She would take me, she would sit me down on our patio and just help me memorize Bible verses, you know.
Wow.
And this aspect of my childhood, you know, is really what started my faith walk. You know, I don't discredit it at all, even when I see it in younger people, because I saw it in me. There was this certain...
It was a seed.
There's this seed that planted, and for whatever reason, I was just drawn to it. You know, when it came to Sunday school, I was I participated. You know, in Sunday school, they helped us. I think we had to, if I remember correctly, we would go, and they would ask us. The teacher would ask us one by one to see or to find out which Bible verse that we memorized in this past week. And I would always be so excited to recite what I had prepared.
Aww.
You know, my mom would help me in those.
Yes.
You know, and then I remember we had this one big conference downtown, and it was an outdoor service. And I was next to my mom. We were worshiping, and I was just there. For the very first time that I could remember, I just threw my hands up and I started worshiping God. And I remember there were kids that were in my Sunday school that was standing right behind me. I could hear them snickering. You know what I mean? Kids, you know, they tease each other. And so I remember I threw my hands, I closed my eyes, and I just started thanking God. And I just worshiping him, singing the songs. And all the kids in the back started snickering. After service, they were like, oh, Glad, look at him. You saw Glad, he was all into it. And I'm like, dude, how come you weren't? But I remember there was that desire, you know, to really know God. And it translated, you know, when we went to America, we did find a church. It was an Assembly of God. And this Assembly of God church, we were there up until I got married, pretty much.
So then during this time as a youth, did you have conviction about what you were doing in your mind and all that stuff, or what you were looking at? Yeah.
Yes, heavily.
So do you think that part of that conviction is kind of what held you back from totally going out and being promiscuous, and like you just kind of internalized it to yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see that, yeah. And some, you know, I battled, bro. I remember in middle school, the more I got introduced to pornography, to the internet, you know, my parents bought us a computer that had internet access on it. And it was free for all, you know, and the deeper I got, the more I got convicted. Middle school, you know, and I think me trying to pursue God and indulging in my sin, it started fighting each other. And like what you're saying, it's created in me subconsciously this boundary to not cross willingly. You know what I mean? To cross willingly, although the flesh desired it and wanted something to happen on its own, you know. And I'm like, if the devil, I remember thinking this as a kid, if the devil tries to give me an opportunity, I'm going to take it. You know what I mean? And so I'm like, all right, God's definitely not going to give me that opportunity. He's not going to let that happen, you know, because I'm in the middle of the night. I'm like, God, help me. All the times I'm praying these prayers, my flesh is wanting the opposite. And though I'm torn, I could feel God's guidance. I could feel his protection over my life, you know, that kept me pure throughout, to some extent.
Right.
Pure,
Yes. Yeah.
you know, throughout high school, you know. That's high school.
Did you ever get into drugs or anything?
No, I didn't get into drugs. I had no desire to drink. I had no desire to smoke or anything like that in school, while in school.
So when you mentioned earlier that you had tried to forget about the violations from your childhood, like what exactly did that entail? So like
how did I cope with it?
Well, because normally when people try to forget, then that's when they dive deep into drugs and alcohol, because they're just trying to suppress those memories, those violations and whatnot. You know what I mean? So what was it, kind of the porn thing, or was it other stuff that you did, or you just kind of like, I'm not thinking about it, I'm not dealing with it?
Yeah, I think it was the latter. I just didn't think about it. And I would share with Pastor now, like, man, it was hard for me up until a year ago to even accept it myself.
So did you go through a lot of denial?
No.
Like,
A lot.
No, that didn't happen.
Or I just tried my best to keep it away from me.
You didn't want to dwell on it. You didn't want to think about it. You didn't.
And it's not that I coped with it through drugs or gravitated. Maybe porn had to do something with it, with the coping mechanism aspect of it. Maybe, but it's. Yeah, it didn't lead me to anything drugs or alcohol related.
So how old were you, or when were you able to kick this porn habit?
Man, it was already a few years in my marriage.
Oh, really?
You know, so this porn addiction, it came into my marriage, yeah. And
did that cause a lot of issues in your marriage?
a lot.
Yeah.
It did cause a lot of issues.
Okay.
So how did you and Yvette meet?
Yeah, so we'll
Okay, so this is the next portion.
Yeah. So we'll go ahead and jump ahead then. So instead of talking about that, let's jump back a little bit and talk about when you met Yvette. And
So I met Yvette high school on our freshman year.
you guys went to school together?
Yeah, we went to school together. That's how we met.
So all through high school.
All through high school.
Oh, nice.
And the district I was in, it had 2 middle schools. I went to one and she went to the other. So high school, we only had one. So that's when both middle schools kind of joined together. and we had a few classes together, you know, freshman year. I think we had 2 or 3, math and English for sure. We had it together. And that's where some of the earliest memories of Yvette in my life, you know.
Did you guys date when you were in high school, or you just knew each other? And
Yeah, we just
friends?
knew of each other. We were just school friends. It's not like we were even friends outside. You know, we just knew of each other in school and class. And whenever we passed each other in the hallway, you know, I would give her a hug. She would give me a hug. We were pretty close that way, I guess, but it didn't extend outside of the school walls.
Until after graduation?
Yeah, that was after graduation.
So how did that all come about?
The graduation part?
Well, just if you guys are, you know, kind of cool at school, but not friends outside of school, you graduate. Usually those type of friendships usually just die.
Yeah.
So how did you guys stay friends, or what happened after?
There's this thing that happened with my wife during high school, and it's a thing called salvation. All right. It's I remember freshman year, I was this very quiet kid, right? And my wife would tell you this too. Like, oh, my husband was such a nerdy, quiet kid. She sat behind me in English class.
Were you in the front row? Were you in the front row? Were you the first seat?
No, I was not. But I remember she sat behind me at some point of the year, and man, she was rowdy, bro. She was rowdy. She had this one friend. They just tag teamed. It was just to a point where I'm like, man, these girls, can they just shut up? You know, I'm this quiet kid, man, and I remember I was sitting in that English class, and the bell rang. She came in, and I look up, and I'm like, okay, that's Yvette. And then she turns around, and half of her head is shaved, you know. And I'm like, wow, Yvette's that kind of girl, I guess. You know, like she just shaved half of her head.
She's rebellious.
Yeah, there's just signs of rebellion right there. And so that was my first impressions of Yvette. And over Facebook, I remember she would slide into my DMs and asking me for homework. I think she had other ulterior motives. I always thought that, but she would deny even today. She's like, I was just asking for homework. I'm like,
Yeah, right.
no, you weren't, mate. You asked for homework. All right, here's the homework. And then she started talking about other things, you know what I mean? And some of the things that she would say then will catch me off guard. I'm like, man, this girl is pretty extreme, you know? And I'm like, this girl, I don't know. You know, she's really out there in the world. And that was the first impression I had throughout high school. And then maybe somewhere junior or senior year, you know, I had her in all social media platforms, Snapchat, Instagram, and all that, Facebook. Next thing you know, this same girl that was so rowdy, that was known to just get people into parties, get them drunk, you know, Mexicans, hey, toma tequila, you know what I mean? And so that's the impression I had up until all over Facebook, all over social media. Jesus this, Jesus that. I love Jesus. Jesus saved me. Jesus is Lord. And I'm like, wow, this girl just completely turned around. Mm-hmm. And all the while, you know, I'm going to church. I have a church background. And my addiction to pornography, I feel like it always gave me a reason to run to God. Knowing that I'm dealing with this addiction, I always knew I needed a savior in Jesus, you know. But that relationship, as it started to build in those years, it stayed in the home, you know. So outside of my home, you know, I wouldn't profess Jesus as my Lord and Savior. I wouldn't talk to my friends as Jesus. But senior year, I would see her doing that. You know, I would see my wife just all of a sudden. Before she would invite people to parties, now she's inviting them to church. She's inviting them to the kingdom of God. And there's this senior year, we had gym class together. And whenever we don't bring our gym clothes, you know, they throw us out there in the bleachers. They just make us sit. Mm-hmm. And I was just enjoying the sun. You know, it was a nice, beautiful East Coast day. I was sitting on one side just by myself. And on the other side of the bleachers, I saw a gaggle of people. They were pretty much in a circle, and there was one person in the middle. And as I'm trying to peek my my ears in there, you know, I'm like, okay, somebody's talking about Jesus. You know, and me having this relationship with God, you know, I'm trying to, I was madly in love with Jesus, honestly. You know, I remember being on Facebook and I was like, I love Jesus. That's as far as my evangelizing went. You could go back on my Facebook and it's like, oh, Jesus this, Jesus that, you know what I mean? But I remember I was like, wow, someone's talking about Jesus. So I got closer and I saw Yvette was the one talking to people about Jesus. I remember she was saying, oh, don't do alcohol, don't do drugs. You know what I mean? It wasn't like super like a full-on sermon. It was just basic fundamental. Hey, don't do this, don't do that. You know, and I'm like, wow. And I approached her. I was like, Yvette, you're a Christian? And she's like, yeah. And at that point, she was sharing her music library with her other friends. And I'm there too. And I'm like, wait, hold on. You listen to them? I think it was United Pursuit, you know, and they're a Christian band. And that took me aback because those are the people that I listen to on my own.
In private.
In private.
You're a closet Christian. You were a closet Christian.
Yes, I was a closet Christian. And so when I found out that she knew about him too, I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool. You know what I mean? The most intimate part of my life, she knows a little bit about it. You know, and so I graduated high school, and that's one thing that last thing I knew about Yvette, you know. And then right after graduation, 2 weeks later, I go to boot camp. I join the Air Force. I enlist in service, and I followed through with the boot camp for a few months, and then they take me into more training, added more months in it. And when I came back, you know, that's when I had my freedom. I had money. You know, the military paid me money, bro, and it was looking pretty good. I'm planning on buying my first car ever, you know, and so a teenager being in the military, having their first car, there's so much liberty all at once. There's so much freedom, you know. And so to me, later's for all that Jesus stuff. Now it's my turn to do my own thing. All the years that, you know, I tried to fight the urges of my flesh, now all of a sudden, full blown. That's when I got into drinking. That's when I got into drugs. You know, and it's not that, you know, all of a sudden I had the urge to do it. It's just like, okay, it's not going to hurt. Let me take it. You know what I mean? My friends, they would invite me to party. You know, we would go to these college parties and we would just be drunk, you know, and then I started smoking weed at that time when I came back from boot camp right after graduation. You know, I was maybe 19 and for so many years, man, I said no to marijuana. Like all my friends in high school, they smoked, and I was known to be that kid like who didn't curse, who didn't drink, who didn't party, who didn't smoke weed, who would always say no to these things. But again, after boot camp, all that liberty, you know what I mean? I'm like I'm on my own now.
Did you think like, oh, I'm a man, I'm mature, or like I'm an adult, I can handle this? Like, was it something like that too? Yeah. Just
there's always that sense of, you know, it ain't that bad. You know, I could do this and live on with it. You know, and man, was I wrong with that? Was I wrong? Because in those months, I mean, that only lasted a few months. You know, because at the same time, God has engraved himself in my life that though I try to run away from him, I couldn't really see this world without him. You know, though I tried to enjoy this world, I've tasted this joy that all my years in church, you know, all my years of going to the altar, God forgive me, you know, all those years I'm trying to kick this pornography issue, you know, and experiencing his mercy over and over and over again, that although I sinned that same week, although I sinned that same Sunday service right after, you know what I mean? I ran to God. God, forgive me. Help me, help me, help me. I cried out to his name. And so Jesus was always engraved in my life. So even when I try to walk out of my Christian faith, You know,
There was always a pulling. You kind of felt like a
yeah, there was this sense of kind of like Ecclesiastes, where the writers, the writers talking about he tried the things of this world to certain boundaries, just to, you know, for himself, just to find out how these things really are, without losing his main motive, without losing his main intention or desire to really just grow in God, you know. And so I tried to rebel, you know, and it led me astray. I remember I would just be in my room. It was just dark. And man, I was filled with so much depression, so much darkness in there. And thoughts of suicide started rolling in,
Oh, wow.
you know, and I was such in a depressive state, you know, that all my friends had the same spirit. We all just mingled together, just all depressed bunch of teenagers, you know, after high school. We're all trying to find our way in life. You know, I remember my friends would hit me up, hey, let's go out. And it would be like 11 p.m. already. And I would just go out with them. And we'll go to like nearest Dunkin' Donuts. We won't even do nothing crazy. We'll just sit there up until like 5 a.m. in the morning, man. Feeling so empty. You know, it's not like we have fun. I mean, a lot of times we would smoke weed, you know, but I
just had
remember
no purpose.
just had no purpose in life, you know. And I would come home, you know, and I would park my car right on that street, and the sun's already rising up. I'm tired. I'm spiritually tired. I'm physically tired, mentally tired of the way I'm living my life. And I'm like, God, I can't live like this. I really can't. I need you to do something. I need a community. Because though I kept going to that church, that Assembly of God church, there's no community in that. You know, it was just a Sunday service, Sunday morning service, and that's it. I was deprived of my community. I was deprived of headship. I was deprived of all of that. You know what I mean? And so at that age, I was really crying out to God, like tears falling all over my face. Right there inside my car, the sun's already rising. And I'm like, God, you know, I need Christian friends. You know, God, put me in a godly community, please, because the community I'm in right now, it's not helping my walk with you. You know, and yeah, I go to church. I can go to church, but it's not like I can find a godly community in there. It's not much of a community in and of itself. You know what I mean?
You were stifled.
Yes.
You
And
weren't growing.
so I graduated high school June. I go to boot camp July, and I come home November. And so from November all the way to just a few months, maybe May, you know, November to May, that's when all of that happened. And in those moments of asking God to give me a community, that's when my wife, or Yvette, then stepped in, you know, and it just happened that way. I remember I would be on social media, and I would always see her still posting about Jesus, still posting about how much she loves Jesus, this and that. And at some point, I was in this little party, just get together with my friends. We were in the basement, just drinking it up. And I was almost drunk, you know, and we were just there sitting, you know, crummy old basement. It wasn't even developed, man. It was all musty and stuff, but it's all that we could have.
Yeah.
You know, as teenagers, it's not like we had money to go to a hotel and throw a nice party.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
it was just an old crummy motel that one of my friends lived. You know, they had it underneath their house. And so that's where we had a bunch of lawn chairs, and we were just drinking. And I was just feeling so empty. I'm like, man, this is pointless. You know, what am I doing with my life? I literally get up. I'm like, oh, I'll be right back. I tell the guys. And I go into my car, and I'm just there. Like, I didn't even want to be in that basement. I just wanted to be alone. And I'm there scrolling, I think, on Snapchat. And I see that she posted something on Snapchat, and I hit her up. I'm like, I think she was posting about how she had an like allergic reaction over some peaches. And I'm like, hey, are you okay? I started it off, and I think that's how the conversation went, but I can't really remember. But I do remember in that conversation, I was trying to tell her, like, hey, you know, I'm in need of Jesus. You know, I see that you're always professing Jesus as this, Jesus as that, you know, and we always talked over social media here and there, you know, so that door was always open for me to confront her. And in that conversation, I was really just asking I was just looking for grace. I was just looking for mercy. I was like, man, I'm half drunk. You know, I'm in my car. I'm down and out. You know, I'm sharing her this. And mind you, we never even talked about Jesus together, but I'm already just sharing to her. And I'm like, okay, I see her being Christian. I'm sure she'll understand. And the way she replied back in all caps, you need to repent. Alcohol is not cool. Drinking is not cool. And I had to reply, I'm like, I already know this. You know what I mean? I know what I'm doing is not cool. I know what I'm doing I need to repent of. You know what I mean? I told them, I just need some grace. You know, and that's how that conversation went. And
So did she end up inviting you to church? Is that how you?
No. I was working inside the base at that point. You know, and I was living there. It was probably like 2 hours away from home. And on the weekends, I would drive up from the base so that I could spend the weekends with my family, with all the friends, you know. And I hit up my friend one Friday evening when I finally got there. I was like, hey, let's hang out, bro. And he was like, all right, pull up at my job. And I pull up at his job. We're just chilling there. He was working at like a soccer field. And, you know, we're in a time and age now where everybody just posts whatever online.
Yes, yeah.
And so
what year was this?
This was 2016.
Okay.
Yeah, 2016. I graduated 2015. And what then? You're like, man, these people young.
Yes.
We were talking about that right before we started the podcast about how young they are. It's like, man, that was just a few years ago.
Yeah. And yeah, well, one of my best friends, he posted like, "Oh, my boy is back in town, yada yada yada," and then he also has Yvette on his social media platform, and so she saw that post, and next thing you know, she slides into my Instagram DMs. You're like, "Hey, by any chance, you know, my family and I were going to a picnic at a lake tomorrow, Saturday morning. Are you down? Or are you willing to go?" You know, so she invited me to this thing. And I look at my friend, I'm like, bro, you look at who just texted me, bro. and
Yeah, she wants me. Look.
Yeah, I'm like, bro, I'm in there, bro. and he looks up at me like, what are you gonna do? And I'm like, like one of my boy was already he was in a relationship. He was already busy at that point because normally we would all just spend time together, just play basketball or something. But at that time, all my friends had something to do, and I'm like, man, there's nothing for me tomorrow, so yeah,
Why
I think
not?
I'm gonna go.
Yeah.
You know, I've never hung out with her. I only knew her in class, you know, and so I said yes. I said, all right, pick me up. I think her family picked me up. I think she offered like, hey, my brother can pick you up, you know. And so the next morning we wake up and I get ready. And as I'm walking down, I see her like, oh, okay, that's Yvette from high school. And then I hop in and her brother's there, another friend, and her right there in the back. And I'm sitting, and as we're driving, she's just, I could, you know, the friends that I had, we were very reserved. It's not like a lot of us were extroverts, you know, and I think that's why we liked each other. You know, we could kind of just vibe off of each other without even having to express much.
Yes.
You know, and so, but her, she was the opposite. And it took me off guard because she's over here just making jokes, just doing different accents, and she's doing Indian accents right off the bat. And I'm like, I'm in there sitting like, yo, that's kind of weird, you know? I love you, babe, I do. and but that was my first impression when we started to really hang out, that she wasn't afraid to express herself. You know, she wasn't like withholding anything back. You know, and we followed through with the whole lake, with the whole picnic thing. And as we spend the whole day together, you know, her and I are talking, I could sense something like she was coming from a different angle. And I'm like, man, this girl's really into me, like almost too upfront. You know, like she's almost making it clear that she's into me. And I've never talked to a girl like that before. I've never hung around a girl like that before, you know. And so all the girls, I'm over here trying to figure out what is she thinking? Is she into me? You know, it's like a mind game. Every single text, every single word, it's a mind game. Oh,
why you should say it like that?
Yeah, analyzing every single word.
But with Yvette, it wasn't like that. You know what I mean? It was just straightforward. There was no playing games. And that's one thing that I took notice of early on, that I wasn't doing these mind games as I would be doing with another girl that I typically would hang around with, you know. And I remember this lake, they had a boat, we rented it out, and me, and her other relative who was our age too, same grade, so I knew of her too. She was in my class. And we were there in a canoe. We were just, you know, hanging around. And out of nowhere, Yvette was like, let's play a game. All excited and stuff. and her niece is right there. She's on the reserve side. And we're just like, okay, sure. And she's like, okay, let's just ask each other questions. I'm like, okay, let's go for it. And she volunteered first, like, I go first. And I'm like, okay, go ahead. I'm going to ask you a question. I'm like, okay, whatever it is. And the first question was like, okay, if you would date a girl, what is something that you look for in a girl?
She was fishing.
Yeah, and then right off the bat, I'm like, yo, she's literally like she's not even trying to break no ice, Daniel. Like, she's over here just throwing Hail Marys. Yeah, just catch it, Glad. And that the whole day went like that. I kid you not, the whole day went like that.
She's all shaking her head. She's like, let me tell you the real story later.
She's like, up next.
And I'm just meeting this girl. And at the same day, I'm meeting all of her family. I'm meeting her mom. I'm meeting her brother. I'm meeting all her tias, her tios. You know, she has a big family. You know, we were just having a good time. I had fun, honestly. You know, all the food that they had. And so,
did you miss that? Like seeing her big family, and then you coming from a big family in the Philippines. Did you was there something like, oh, I remember this, or?
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I was very drawn to her family. You know, when we started to really date, it was almost like I didn't even want to spend time with my family. I wanted to spend time with hers because there was a certain, just
dynamic
life.
Yeah,
there's just life there that I found. You know, whether it was from God or what, but that's what I saw, you know, that community, and I was drawn to it.
So when did you get, because she was in church, she was talking about Jesus, you guys, I'm assuming, started hanging out more.
Yeah.
Started dating. Did you start going to her church, or when did you kind of rededicate your life back to
Jesus?
Yeah.
So can I tell some stories?
Yeah.
Right before that?
Yes.
So that same lake day is what we call it, lake day. It's we leave the lake, we pack up, and then we go, and she invites me again, like, hey, my family and I were actually gonna go back to the house, you know, and just relax there. You want to keep hanging out with us, or we could drop you off now. It's up to you. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I got nothing else to do for the rest of the day, and so I tagged along with her family, and we were just there hanging out in the living room watching soccer, and it came to a point where like, all right, I'm out of here. You know what I mean? And I said goodbye to everybody, and the very last thing she tells me is, call me. She's like, make sure you call me. And I'm like, oh, in front of her family. You know what I mean? And like, she's making it known to everybody that she's into me. And so, and I did, you know, I try to keep the communication going. And so that weekend, it passed, and I go back down. I go back to the base, And over there in the base, I'm on my own. You know, I'm working in the military, and they give me my room. You know, talk about liberty and all that stuff. And you know, man, I was still in that dark area. You know, I was pursuing the pleasures of the flesh. I was trying to gratify it. I'm like tiptoeing around it. And yeah, I remember that so at that time, you know, we would talk over social media. I would text her at this point. I had her number now, you know, and not too long after that, I took a trip to Europe. I took a trip to Germany, you know, and there's this thing in the military called Space A. It's pretty much you hop into a military aircraft that has a mission flying somewhere. And if the pilot chooses to open up some passenger seats, they can do it. And they let people know at the terminal. And if you want to, you can catch that ride. So me and my buddy of mine, we did that. And there was a flight going to Ramstein, Germany. And it's for free. And I'm like, hey, 19-year-olds,
yeah.
we got money. You know what I mean? And so let's take a trip to Europe. And so there, I take a trip to Europe. And we spent a few days there. You know, and my friend did not know God. You know, he was into the world as well. We drive 5 hours to Paris on a rental, and, you know, we're just enjoying Europe, you know, and we're getting ready to fly back to the America. You know, we go back to Ramstein, Germany, where we can catch that flight. And one of his friends that was stationed there in Germany, we linked up with him, and he was like, hey, there's this house, you know, I don't know what they call it, sex house or whatsoever, that they had over there in Germany. And I forget what they call it, but it's this ring something. You know, it's pretty much like a prostitution ring, you know, that's very legal there in Europe. And where I was at wasn't too far from there. And so all the military folks that were stationed there, the young kids, you know, fresh out of high school, you know what I mean? They ship them there in Germany. They get exposed to that.
This isn't illegal.
Yeah, they get exposed to that.
Yes,
and so while we're there, one of his boys is like, hey, you know, there's this house that you can go to, you know, and have yourself a time. And me, my boy and I are like, we're still like haven't crossed that line of virginity yet. And so we're over here, there's a perfect opportunity. We're in Europe, you know what I mean? We're away from home, you know what I mean? And but part of me like, whoa, what am I about to do? You know, I know God's watching for sure.
Yeah.
You know, but silly old me, I followed through anyways. And man, I remember that time, the moment we pulled up in the car, it was like in this industrial place. You know how they have these industrial businesses, warehouses and all that. And it takes us in the back part of a building. And there's a parking lot that we parked the rental in. And immediately we could hear music. I look up like this in the building behind me, and I see this big old window and naked women. You know, they're just having a party, just dancing around. You know what I mean? And my boy was like, okay, that's the place. Okay, that's the place. And so we go in. I'm like, man, you know what? It is what it is. I'm in Europe, you know. So what Jesus says at this point? I'm going to do what I want to do. You know, all these years.
I'm on vacation.
Yeah. And so vacation spiritually too. You know, I could just pick it up later on. Man, but yeah, I followed through with it. That's where I lost my virginity, man. Oh, man. That's where it was. And I remember it was, man, just even, I remember when I first shared this story to my wife, man, I never experienced panic attacks, bro. But in that moment that I was sharing to my wife, I had one. Like I could see the red light room. It wasn't even regular lighting. It was red. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And just the atmosphere there, it wasn't a rinky-dink, bro. It was like, to me, it seemed very upscale. It really was, you know? But the whole atmosphere, it felt dark. Mm-hmm. It just felt like, okay, this is obviously not from God. This is not what I'm used to. This is what this is what the word of God that always warned me about the world is talking about, that this is the world right now. Mm-hmm. And it was taking a hold of me.
So when, after it happened, after, you know, you got caught up in the flesh, and after you were done, did you have conviction? Were you like, when leaving the place, were you just like, dude, what the heck did I just do?
Yeah, I was, let me take some. Oh, hallelujah. Yeah, man, heavy conviction, bro. I
you
remember.
Did you have like major regret? Because I mean, you know, your first time to be at a whorehouse is kind of
Yeah.
like, dang, what the heck?
Is that what
That's what they call the whorehouse.
Yeah.
That's the house you're looking for.
Yeah. That's
Is that why you're laughing? Is that what you're laughing?
that's funny, bro.
Well, I knew where this kind of leading the story was like, oh boy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When you're telling it.
It was
And
a
so-
whorehouse.
Yeah, and so just in my head and kind of seeing you talk about, you know, you grew up with kind of this religious thing, you know what I mean? The church, you were exposed to it, you desired a relationship. And so you kind of, you know, put God on the sideline here and there, but you desired more. And so you telling the story, I mean, from, you had to watch mine because mine is a little similar as far as like being exposed from a young age and kind of just on the tiptoeing the edge, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But where, like you had mentioned that in your youth, you felt like it was God was kind of holding you back from crossing the line from major stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so when you're talking about this story, like I can just picture, you know, in my head how I would be, how I can imagine that you felt is that's definitely not the way you want to, like now looking back, you know what I mean? Like, dude, what was I doing? Like, that's not how I wanted to lose it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like when you cross the line with somebody that's, you know, some loser or a one night stand at a bar, you know what I mean? You're like, dang, what the heck was I doing? You know what I mean? Like that was meaningless.
Yeah.
It was a pointless situation. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
like what was going through your head after the fact?
Man, immediately like the blinders were taken off. You know what I mean? It's kind of like Adam and Eve. Their eyes were open. They were filled with shame, you know, and they started covering up. And that's exactly what I did, man. After it was done, I remember it was upstairs, and I walked downstairs to the locker room. They even gave us a robe and all that stuff, champagne. And when we walked in, bro, here's your locker, unchanged, and here's your robe. Also, here's a bottle of champagne. You could drink as much as you want, you know? And so I'm walking downstairs. I'm like, I throw the girl out the side. I'm done. I go downstairs, and she's following me, and she's this Romanian girl. Now, I started talking to her because she started following me downstairs. And soon to find out, she's trying to take her payment, you know? And so she follows me to the locker room, and right there they had like this little kiosk where you could pay with your credit card. And as I'm getting dressed up, I started talking to her. I'm like, do you enjoy doing this? And I could still see her, young Romanian girl, bro. She's new to Germany. She's only there for work.
Yeah.
And she's like, yeah, very shallow, very soulless. Yeah. You know, and you could see that almost like a dead, the dead person in there. You know, a dead person that's walking, you know, and that's what I sensed from her. And part of me wanted to talk to her about Jesus. So ironically, bro. So ironically. I kid you not. I was this back and forth Christian, man, that wanted to take one. I always called myself 1 foot in, 1 foot out Christian.
Yep.
You know, and I 1 foot was madly in love with Jesus, and 1 foot was madly in love with the world. And I was right in the middle of that. And I'm asking her questions and stuff, and I pay, and I finally get dressed, and my boy's still up there doing his business. And I go into the rental. I don't even go to the driver's seat. I go in the passenger seat. I start crying. I'm like, God, I'm sorry. You know, I was filled with conviction. I knew that what I had just done was something that, you know, a very big moment of my life, a very special moment of my life, and I just wasted it. I just wasted it, you know what I mean? And I was filled with conviction, bro. And then at that point, I didn't even want to stay in Europe anymore. I was like, bro, let's just go home.
You just felt like dirty and just kind of like, ugh.
Yeah, I couldn't even enjoy anything at that point. I'm like, bro, let's go home.
Shame.
And my boy comes back out. I was like, bro, did you finish? I couldn't. Listen, it ain't that funny. But yeah, he didn't have a time himself.
Sorry.
He didn't have a time himself. He was like, what a waste of money. Let's go home. So I didn't even have to tell this guy. Like, I didn't have to like convince him to come home. Like, he was himself ready to come home. And so we go back to the Air Force base. We go to the terminal. We look at the schedule. All right, we're taking the next flight out. You know, it's the next few hours. You know, we didn't even sleep. We just stayed up. Like, man, we're not missing this flight. Ready to go. And so we take that flight. I come home. And I remember that first, I think I came home in the middle of the week. And on that first Sunday, I come to church. And while I was there in Europe, Yvette would see my post on Snapchat and Instagram. She's like, oh, you're in Europe. Oh, send me pictures, send me videos and all that. Like, we had already went to the lake. We had already, you know, established that first day together. And so, and then I went to Europe and she sees all of this. And she's like, oh, you know, that's so cool, Glad. And little did she know I was half drunk most of the time, you know, and bar hopping. But that first Sunday service back at home, you know, I'm hanging out with my family after service. We go to Chinatown in New York City, you know, and we spend the afternoon there. And as we're driving back home to Jersey, you know, traffic, you know, we're going through Holland Tunnel. I get a text from Yvette, like, oh, I hear you're back in town. Like, all of a sudden, she hears again. You know what I mean? Like, she's just hearing down. Like, word on the street that I'm always home. Like, whenever I get home, she hears about it.
She was stalking you, Glad.
Yeah.
She's stalking you.
And so she texts me like, oh, we should hang out. You know what I mean? And I'm texting her in the car. My brother's driving. And she's like, oh, are you free? Can I come over later at 5 p.m.? Can I come over your place? And in my head, I'm like, yo, this girl is really, like, she has no type of boundaries. Like, she's ready to be in my room, it seemed like. You know what I mean?
She's all, calm down.
Yeah.
Hold on, calm down.
Babe, you can share your own story later, babe, but this is how I took it. And my family was there, and I'm telling my family, I'm sharing my sister. I'm like, hey, sis, you know, there's this girl who seems very interested in me, and she's like, what do you think? You know, what do you think about her? You think you're gonna hang out with her? You know, I'm like, well, obviously she's not going over my house. You know, our house, we barely had space. You know, it was just, I never liked having people over my house. My family was never that welcoming. It wasn't like they wanted people there as well.
Yeah.
You know, they wanted to keep it themselves. And I did too, you know, and the way my house was set up, it wasn't meant for visitors. And so whenever a visitor was there, it was always an awkward moment. And I didn't want her to be in that moment, you know. And so I'm like, yeah, if I say yeah, I'll probably take her out, pick her up. But she's like, my sister asked me, do you like her? And I'm like, no, I don't, you know, but are you going to hang out with her? And I'm like, yeah, I probably will tonight. And she's like, why are you doing that? You know, don't lead other women on like that. Like, what if,
don't string her along.
Yeah, what if a man did that to me? You know, how would you feel as a brother? You know, and because I think she asked me why would you still hang out with her? I'm like, I don't have anything else to do at this point. Like, I'm just looking for something to do. I'm bored, you know, and that's what I told her. I'm bored. I'm like, well, how'd you feel if a man told me that I'm gonna hang out with you just because I'm bored? You know, you wouldn't appreciate that as a brother.
Yeah.
You know, and so, but I still followed through with it. I told her, hey, you know, I'll take you to the pool hall. Pool hall's there, you know, at that, like, me and my friends would always go there. We had a few spots. And I pick her up, and I take her to the pool hall. And then that was our very first date in that moment. And right after the pool hall, it was late at night already. I take her to Hoboken. I don't know if y'all know Hoboken, but it's this one place. It's across the Hudson River, and it's literally the best place that you could look at the New York City skyline, especially at night. It's nice.
It's like a make-out point or something.
It's where people go to do their business. You know what I mean? It really is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I take her there. And I'm over here trying to make my move. You know, I had already crossed that line of Virginia. I'm operating in a different spirit, man.
Like, you're a pro.
Yeah, I'm operating in a different spirit right now. And I could sense that she's, like, right off the jump, like she would always talk about Jesus too. And whenever the situation would try to get out of line, she would bring Jesus up, you know, and we would always talk about Jesus. Like that's one of the things, one of the main topics that we would always talk about, like my love for Jesus and her love for Jesus. And yeah, I'm over here trying to cause her to fornicate and sin and fall down in her faith, you know, in that first day. But yeah, I remember. I don't want to share too much.
What are you say, Glad?
There's the chancla gonna come in just a second. So.
But yeah, I made my move that first date night, and you know, I didn't get too far, you know, but it definitely outside of Christian standards, you know, and
she didn't give any pushback?
She did at first, but I could tell that she was feeling it too, like the temptation. And I remember she before she gave in, like when we were kissing, right? This is a Christian podcast, right? We can say we were kissing.
Keep it clean, all right?
Yeah, we were kissing, right? And I remember right before. I'm sorry, babe. But right before she turned to kiss me, I could tell that she was like, and she kissed me. I could tell that her demeanor was like, okay, like screw all of this. Like I'm tired of, like I don't want to. Like she just gave in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like she knew what she was about to step into. She was gonna give into sin, and so she like, screw it, let me do it. You know, and right after that, I take her home, and you know, I think communication was a little slow. I don't know how it really was. I can't remember if it stayed consistent daily. But I remember my wife would tell me, like, man, after that first date, I told myself I'm never hanging out with him again. I'm never hanging out with him again, because she's trying to be pure. She just got out of a relationship. She'll tell that portion of her story, right? And so she's trying to reestablish her faith, her love for God as well. You know what I mean? Although she spoke about Jesus a lot, you know, she had her own issues. And so, but we continued hanging out. So regardless of what she tried to say, like, I'm never hanging out, we still ended up hanging out. And it dawned on me, because the next few times we would hang out, I would try to make my move, you know. And I remember I took her to a park late at night. We were just sitting in the car, you know, just talking about life, talking about God and all that stuff. And I started making my move, and she pushed me away, and she started talking about Jesus. And right there, something dawned on me, you know, like, man, God was like, ain't this something that you prayed for a few months ago? You were literally in the same car crying out to my name, God, I need Christian friends. And now here you are. Here's a Christian friend for you, and you're trying to scoundrel it. You're trying to mess it up. You know, do you really want to change? Are you really tired of being depressed? Are you really tired of living in this darkness? Or do you want what I want for you? Because it's right here. You know, that's when it dawned on me. And something shifted in me. I stopped trying to make my move. It wasn't just about my flesh anymore when I started hanging out with Yvette. It became something that, oh, man, this is part of my walk at this point, or my Christian walk. And she had this youth group in her church. We would attend that, you know. And I became a big part of that youth ministry that they had over there. It's pretty much a regular service, but for youth. And then I became part of the worship team. I played the guitar there. We would always hang out with the group. And I think, but right before I joined the worship team, I finally asked her to be my girlfriend. I called her over the phone, and I'm like, hey, you know, do you want to make this official? And she didn't like how I approached it. She really wanted me to be straightforward. And like, what do you mean it'll be official? You know, and basically it took a few hours to get it out of me. Like, hey, I want you to be my girl. You know, and she's like, okay, yeah. And so, and I tried to explain to her why I wanted to date her. You know, because growing up, though I looked at girls in a lustful, perverted way, I knew that I wanted to marry a Christian girl. My mom was Christian, my dad wasn't. And when we finally joined together in America, I saw the dynamic there wasn't a healthy one, you know, and it wasn't a loving one. It didn't strengthen our Christian faith as a family. It only hindered it, you know. And so I made up my mind at such a young age, maybe in middle school, high school. I'm like, man, I'm not gonna marry no unbeliever. One, it says that in the Word of God, and two, I'm seeing it right in front of me every single day. Why it's true. You know, and so though I messed around with other girls, I tried to talk to other girls. I dated other girls here and there. I knew that those small, short amount of time that I spent with those girls ain't gonna last long. You know, I knew I'm just here because one, I'm bored and I'm just trying to have fun.
Yeah.
You know, but it's not gonna be serious. You know what I'm? Because you're not Christian. I'm not gonna marry you. You know, and so I told her that, hey, I want you to be my girlfriend with a motive in my mind that I want to marry this girl because I see she's on fire for God. I see that she's trying to stay pure. You know what I mean? She's trying to walk in holiness, and that drew me to her. And so I wasn't all lovey-dovey. It wasn't a Disney butterflies, rainbows, and all that stuff when we were dating. It was just, I want to do this because I want to grow in God. And she agreed on that too. Like, hey, let's help each other walk with Jesus. You know, we need each other.
Okay, so you guys are approaching this with good intentions after, you know, you got the revelation or whatnot. So then what led up to the fornication in you guys' relationship? Was it just like just a night of like just randomness? It just kind of got caught up in the moment, or?
It was just the way that we were really dating each other. It was just setting it up for that moment, you know.
You're just putting yourself in certain situations.
Yeah,
we probably shouldn't have.
Yeah, we weren't in a church that had standards. Like, I'm hearing how our fellowship is. Like, I envy that. Like, I wonder if we would have been we would have saved our purity with each other if we had those type of standards. But at the end of the day, I sinned. You know what I mean? It's not like standards are just standards. At the end of the day, the sin, the desire for it is always going to be there. You're still going to have to fight it. At the end of the day, if you want to sin, you're going to find your way to sin. You know what I mean? But I look back and we had no type of standards. We had no type of accountability. I took her out whenever. I was alone with her whenever. There was no boundaries. You know, it was just trying to stay hold each other accountable, which ain't gonna work. You know what I mean? Trying to stay pure with each other, that ain't gonna work. You need that outside help, outside accountability. And so we started we were sinning, we were fornicating for the majority of our dating months. We dated from June all the way to the time we got married, which was the next April. So it wasn't even a year of dating when we got married. And I remember every Wednesdays we would fast from each other. Right off the very first week that we started dating, we're like, hey, you know, we can't idolize each other. You know, we can't make each other our God. So I'm like, let's fast. Let's spend a day where we don't talk to each other, where we don't see each other. We focus on our relationship with God. And that went on throughout our dating months, and even throughout even that fasting went even into my marriage, but obviously not from each other at that point, but for some other reasons or other things. But even then, even though we fasted, even though we were in ministry together, even though we tried to do the things of God together, we read the Bible together, we did all that stuff, you know, we would fornicate, we would sin.
Did you have any guilt from what you were doing, or?
Yeah. And that was there was that one point where the depression went away when I started dating her and before the fornication. And then depression came back stronger. Darkness, it was just glooming over me even stronger when we started fornicating. And it came to a point where later on in our dating months, I was like, man, I can't do this. You know what I mean? I got tired of it. You know, I got tired of being depressed. I got tired of being robbed of the joy and the peace that God had. I would get so much sleep paralysis in those months. It's not even funny. It was almost like every other night.
Oh my goodness.
I would wake up in the middle of the night. It was just I couldn't move, you know, and I didn't know much about sleep paralysis, but obviously I was living in sin.
Yes, yeah.
I was living in sin. There was a doorway for the enemy to just grab a hold of my life. And so in that moment, you know, I was tired of being tormented. I was tired of trying to follow God and yet not going anywhere with it, always in sin.
So so during your dating period, then did you guys get things right and do things away from each other till you got married? Or, because you guys say that she got knocked up.
Yeah.
So whereabouts in your dating did she get knocked up?
So we started dating June, and January she got pregnant. We found out that she got pregnant.
So did that accelerate you guys getting married?
Yeah. That was the, you ask, when did we get it right in our dating? We didn't.
Okay.
We got it right when we decided to get married. When we found out that she was pregnant, we were like, man, what are we going to do? You know, it was 2 kids. To me, I was a kid then. She was a kid back then, 19. We were both 19, you know, and we're finding out she's pregnant. I'm in college trying to finish a degree at least in something, you know, and so I have a whole bunch of plans ahead of my life. And I knew that if I would become a father, you know, a lot of that would stop. A lot of that would slow down at least. And when we found out she was pregnant, we actually thought about aborting the baby. And,
Really?
yeah. And, you know, it was mainly her. She was stuck on aborting the baby. When we started dating, she would always say, I don't even want to get married. I don't even want to have kids. And, you know, that's because of her upbringing. But she established that, you know. But one thing I knew in my wife or my girlfriend then was that she did love God. And so I never doubted it. Like, this girl could say whatever she wants, but as long as she's going to follow God, God's going to make her a mother. God's going to make her a wife. You know what I mean? That's just the will of God. You know what I mean? Like, but anyways.
So those thoughts of aborting the baby, were those just real reactive, quick thoughts because you guys are scared, or was that something that you guys actually kind of thought about seriously for a while?
I think it was just out of fear and just trying to get out of the situation. She even had an appointment with Planned Parenthood already. And I remember sitting in the car. We did a lot of talking then. I was like, man, we really messed up, you know. And me, you know, it was boyish of me the way I was handling it. I was very boyish. It was a childish way. I wasn't a man at all. I was giving her. It was almost like this is how I told her. I'm like, if you keep the baby, I'm willing to become the father. But if you don't, it's fine by me. I'm going to go on my merry way. I'm going to continue going to college and follow through with my plans. You know, and it's almost like I gave her the full decision, just the full responsibility on her. I didn't want this responsibility, you know what I mean, of choosing life or death. You know, such a boyish way to approach it.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, but I do remember telling her, like, man, but if you follow through this abortion, I don't think I'll see you the same way.
Yeah, I know.
You know, and I knew that. And right before we got pregnant, or she got pregnant, I was already thinking about breaking it up. There was a service where I pulled her to the side. You know, it was getting too rough already. The fornicating is just getting out of hand, and it just wasn't good for us spiritually. And so I was about to break it. I pulled it to the side, and I didn't know it then, but I knew. Now she would tell me that she knew what it was going to be about. You know, we were both sensing where this relationship was going to go. So as I pulled it to the side, she distracted herself. Like, oh, I can't talk right now. Someone's calling my name. No one was calling her name. But she pulled herself. So I couldn't, you know, the conversation never went. And literally, I think the next day she tells me I missed my period. And so while I'm trying to break it up, we get this news that she's pregnant, you know, and there was one night where, you know, something happened in my wife. I let her tell the story, but we decided to keep the baby, you know, and we go before our headship. We go before our youth leaders and like, hey, we're pregnant. You know, we were scared to tell the news because they were the first people that we told, you know, and we didn't know how they were going to react. And when we told them, they're like, congratulations. And I'm like, wait, hold on. Weren't you supposed to tell me, hey, y'all messed up, y'all sinned and all this? But because they looked at it in a way that y'all messed up in the past, but, you know, you guys are having a baby. You know, what you do now is what's going to matter. You can make it right from here on out. And that's the way we approached it. You know, though I messed up in the past, you know, we're in a situation now that we can make it right before God. We don't have to keep messing up before God. We can change, you know? And so I stood before those youth leaders. How can we make this right before God? Because this is too much out of my control. This is too far out of my willpower to do something about it. How can I make this right before God? And they said, the only thing is for you to get married. And the funny thing is, even before we found out she was pregnant, I was already trying to bring up the topic of getting married. And she, like I said, she already established she doesn't want to get married. And so whenever I bring it up, she push it away, you know. But when our youth leader said the only thing to make it right, you know, for you guys to get married, you know, and I'm like, man, I'm all for it. You know, if this is what it takes for me to become right before God, for God to be in this moment, you know, because I'm in a situation where the last thing I need is for God to leave me, you know, for God to not have his hand upon my life. You know, I want his hand upon my life moving forward. And so that's exactly what we decided on. You know, it wasn't for me, it was easy because I was already growing up. I already had the desire to be a father myself, to be a husband myself, but not my wife. You know, there was a little bit of in a way, just convincing for her, you know, she really needs to hear from God. And what she did hear from God. And we get married in April. You know, we moved in. We actually moved in first before we got married. And even then, I was like, I don't think we're making anything right because we're not married. We're living together. In God's terms, we're still fornicating. You know what I mean? And so I was like, babe, you got to talk to your pastor because my pastor, I think he was away or something. He couldn't marry us. And so the fastest door for us to get married was through her pastor. Like, tell your pastor to marry us. Tell your pastor to marry us. You know, being in the same home, I was uneasy. You know, spiritually, I was uneasy. I really just wanted to be right before God. And so we finally got a hold of him. He set the day, and he said, you just need one witness for each person. So I brought my mom, and she brought her friend that she doesn't even talk to anymore. You know, and all the wedding was, you know, we grabbed her pastor from his office, and he goes to the altar, and we say the vows. And I was in my jean jacket. I was in my hoodie, jean jacket, and jeans, and I think sneakers. And she was in some jeans and cardigan too.
Oh, you guys didn't even dress up, nothing.
We didn't, nothing. It wasn't anything special. And part of me now, I'm like, man, I could have done something, you know, at least something.
Yeah.
You know, and it's something that I do regret, you know, but.
What did your family say about all of this? Like, did they know she was pregnant? Like, how did they feel about this? Or
especially your mom. Since
yeah.
She did have a relationship. Was she like
disappointed? No, they were more shocked. They took it as like, wow, this is really happening right now. You know, because I remember when I first decided to tell my mom. It was on a Sunday morning service. I told my pastor. I pulled him to the side, which I never did. I never told my pastor anything about my life. And all of a sudden, I'm telling him, hey, I got a girl pregnant, you know. And so he was taken aback, maybe, based off of his demeanor. Mm-hmm. But my mom saw me pull my pastor to the side. And so at the end of the service, or when we got home, she asked me about it. And that's when I was like, okay.
So what? Let me just clarify something. So when you say my pastor, her pastor, were you guys going to different churches?
Oh, yeah. I was going to the Assembly of God church. So I had a different pastor.
Oh, okay.
She had a different pastor.
So when you say you guys were in a youth group together, was that through her church?
Yeah, that was through her church.
Oh, okay. Okay. So she had the youth group that you guys were a part of, but you still attended your church on Sunday mornings.
Yeah, on Sunday mornings.
Okay.
On Friday nights was when we went to her church.
Okay.
What church was she a part of?
She was part of a Spanish Methodist church. We call it IMLP, Iglesia Metodista La Pasek, something like that. Yeah, it was a Spanish church.
Okay, so at this point, then you guys get married. How soon after you guys get married do you guys move to California?
I think it was just after we celebrated 1 year anniversary.
Okay.
Yeah, and that.
And it was because of the military? Is that
Yeah,
why
it
you
was
moved?
because of the military. Because even when we decided to get married, we talked. We were right outside the IKEA parking lot. Like, how are we gonna do this? You know, when we finally decided, okay, we're gonna keep the baby. We're gonna do things right. There was almost this weight that fell off of me. You know what I mean? There was still a heavy responsibility that I knew I was about to take on. You know, now that I'm about to be a husband and a father. But there was this relief that came over my life in that moment. And in that moment, I was like, babe, this is what we're going to do. You know what I mean? And we started asking each other questions. How do you want that? How do you want that? And so we were like, okay, the job I'm in ain't going to provide for long, you know, but I am in the military. I was a reservist, so I was just doing it part-time. Or whenever they wanted to activate me, they would activate me for a few months, you know. So I was doing reserves when we got married and working a civilian job. And it really wasn't, I didn't see no growth in that. And so we're like, let's join the military, you know. And so throughout our first year of our marriage, we were trying to gather all the paperwork, run all the processing and all that stuff so that we can go active duty. And so that first year was a lot of that. And I think May of next year, we do go to active duty, and they station us to California. And from there, there's just a whole nother chapter.
So now you have a baby. Now you're moving across country.
Yeah.
Now you're in the military. What's going through your mind now?
It was a lot. And those years there in Cali, they were some of the most rough patches I ever had in life, you know, in terms of my marriage. You know, the first year there in California was literal hell. There was no peace in the house. My wife and I, which were kids with their own kid now,
So you know, like around 20.
I was 20. We were both 20, and we had a baby, and we didn't have family around. We were trying to find a church. We got established in a church that were kids themselves, and so there wasn't much support that we could find. And man, there was domestic violence going on in the house. I remember in that first year, the first time I raged right in front of my wife. You know, I brought this nice broom to clean the garage, and that same day I broke it. I just started I don't know what it was. It was just a regular conversation that I just lost my patience. I started raging, literally veins coming out of my face. I grabbed my broomstick and I started smashing it right in front of her. She closed the door on me. She didn't want to see that. You know what I mean? I was just there. It was in that moment, it really shocked me. I'm like, man, I didn't know I could rage like that. Because
you never done that before?
All these years, all my friends, oh, you're one of the most chill people. You talk so chill too. You from California. And it just so happened I get stationed in California, you know. And so that really shocked me that I have the capability to rage out like that, especially in front of my wife, you know. And I couldn't find help. It didn't get any better that first year. And just before we hit 1 year there in California, there was domestic violence and the cops had to get involved. You know, there was this one time that there was this one event that we were fighting so many times in that week, and it just reached the top, you know, and she finally called a sister in the church, like, hey, this is happening, you know, and we already told our young pastor that there's domestic violence, and it didn't get handled. And then a few months later, it happens again, and this is when really the cops had to get involved. They come in, they separate my wife and I, and they take her testimony, they take mine, and they're like, hey, in the state of California, regardless of who's right, who's wrong, we're always going to take the man out the house, put him in jail, you know. And so my son saw me getting handcuffed right there. He was there in a high chair as I was on top of my wife being physical, you know.
Yeah, so you actually put your hands on her.
I put my hands on her. And so this, let me give a little more context with this story, because when we got married, you know, I was still in my addiction to pornography. And the more I got stressed, the more I got challenged, I ran to it. You know, talk about trying to cope. And God dealt with me in a dream right in that same week. And in this dream, I saw this one old 2-story, 3-story apartment or home. It's old. All the exterior was already getting all raggedy, but it was in a snowy place, kind of like Alaska, and there was a big plain around it. It was fields. You know, it wasn't much there wasn't a lot of neighbors around. And I go inside this house, and apparently we lived at the top, in the 3rd floor. And I go in. It's just this kind of project-looking apartment, you know. And the first room that you enter in the main door is the kitchen, and then a small kitchen. And then right there is the living room right next to it. And I remember I sat there in the dining area, and I'm just sitting there in that dark place. And I see this one guy, tall, skinny, lanky, Caucasian-looking guy, old man, and he's wearing a black trench coat. And he goes into my apartment. I'm like, "Who are you, bro?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm your neighbor downstairs. I'm your neighbor, 2nd floor neighbor." And he starts telling me, "By the way, this door that you have right here, it's not a door at all. You gotta put a real door there, because what in that dream, what I had was just a drape cloth. It wasn't a door that you can lock." And so he was like, "I've been going in and out of your apartment. You're not even knowing it." You know what I mean? So he finally went in. I noticed him. "You got to put a real door there," he tells me. And as he's talking to me, Jose and my wife are in the living room. She starts screaming. And apparently she runs to the kitchen like, babe, go look at Hosea. I run. I look at Hosea, this baby infant. He's there, foam coming out of his mouth, you know, just having a seizure. And the guy follows right behind me, pushes me out the way. He's like, "I'll take care of this." He grabs something out of his trench coat, a needle kind of thing, injects it into my son, and my son dies.
In your dream?
In my dream.
Yeah.
And then I wake up from that. You know, I wake up from that into this life, into this marriage that's just been fighting all week, you know. And then every time we fight, I run into pornography. You know what I mean? I was in spite. And I would just go into that realm. And basically, like, I knew that God was trying to tell me, "Hey, kick off this habit, man, because you're opening a door. You're opening a door for the enemy to just walk in and out of your life, and you're letting this happen." You know what I mean? Ultimately, if you don't stop, your son's going to have to pay for it. You know, and that was that same night, I woke up, I think it was 2 or 3 a.m., and for whatever reason she was up to, and we started fighting. Started getting into it, you know, just yelling at the top of our lungs, and my son's in his room sleeping, and she's like, "I've had it, I'm out of here." She packs her bag, she leaves, she takes our brand new Wrangler, she gets out, and the Wrangler is in the garage, and I got my little Jetta in the driveway, so she doesn't even have much room to get out. So what I found out later on is she grabs the Wrangler, she goes into the grass and runs over our mailbox. And I found out later that day, I'm like, "Why is that mailbox all crooked?" You know what I mean? And I put 2 and 2 together. There's tire marks right there. So she skirted out of the
plowed
house.
Through.
Yeah, 3 a.m. in the morning. And And sure enough, man, I'm alone in the house, my son in his room. I go into my addiction to pornography. I'm like, God, I don't care if you, because God told me right then and there, like, if you don't do if you do this right now, I'm going to take your family away. I'm like, I don't even care at this point. Look at her. She's already gone. There's no peace in the house. And so I fall into sin. I go to sleep, and the next day we have that fight. You know, she was throwing avocados at me across the room, and there were a lot of things being thrown at me, and I couldn't make her stop. You know, I was like, you gotta stop. And I would grab her shoulder, start shaking her. You gotta get out of this. And then she was putting her hands on me. I was scratched up over here, and then because of that, I lost it. You know, I pushed her, and Jose is right there in the dining area sitting in his high chair. I pushed her. She falls to the ground, and I think I gave her 2 punches to the back, you know, and that's when I was like, I got to get myself out of this situation, you know, and she calls an older sister in the church, and the older sister is like, if you feel endangered right now, you got to call the cops. And at that moment, after I noticed what I just done, I wanted to leave. I'm like, I can't stay in this house. I don't want to do any more damage than I already did, you know. But right before I was about to leave, the cops show up. She did call the cops. That's when they take me, they handcuff me, they put me in jail. And right then and there, I was just staring at my life alone in that jail cell. And I was like, man, all my life I've been a goody two-shoe. You know, I've gotten good grades. I don't belong here. You know what I mean? To me, I'm like, this is for murderers. But then again, you know what I mean? God showed me where my sin was. God showed me the darkness of my behavior. And I was humbled. And I was humbled. And I get out. They transferred me to a different facility. And there I spent the night. And I was going to spend another week there. And I'm like, I don't want to spend a week here. I got to work. I'm in service. You know, they had to be involved with it too, because they need to be notified. You know, and so they're knowing all of my garbage that goes on in the house, and I didn't like that, but they had to know it. And I decided to pay the bail. I paid the bail, and then that same morning I get out. But the moment I get home, my family's gone, and I found out that there's a restraining order that she put on me, and she packed her bag. She took my baby. She went back home to the East Coast. And I go into that room all messed up, you know, everything thrown around. And I'm just there staring at that house that we were renting there in Cali. I was like, man, this is so sad. You know, this is not what I had envisioned my life to be. This is not what I had envisioned my marriage to be. And it really hit me right then and there. And God was like, see, what I tell you.
Yeah.
I thought you didn't care. I thought you could afford to lose. I thought it didn't matter to you. Now I did what I was going to say. I said I was going to do. I took her away from you. It happened that same day.
Yeah.
And it hit me, man. That's when there was a shift in my spirit. There was a shift in the way I was approaching God. I was very humbled, you know, and for many months she stayed there in the East Coast. And man, I knew that I wanted my family back, but I knew I couldn't have my family the way that I was. You know, there were some things that needed to be handled. And so I stayed with my pastor. I stayed in his house for many months. And there I just spent time with God. In that room, it was literally just a mattress, my Bible, and my work clothes, and that's it. And I started journaling, you know, and in that season of not having my family, and seeing the damage of my own sin is when something clicked in my mind that I don't even want to go back into pornography. I don't want to keep living like this, because for so many years I've tried everything out in my own strength. I try to fast from phones. I try to do all of this tactics, strategies to kick off this habit, but I couldn't find the willpower out of me to just walk out of it. I kept going back into watching, but in that moment, that season, that's when I really found deliverance.
Maybe that's when you finally broke that bondage.
Yeah, and it makes me it makes me see now that when it comes to deliverance, a person really has to want it.
Yeah, of course.
You know what I mean? The person really has
Absolutely.
to want it. And a person who's struggling with an addiction, who keeps finding his way or her way back into it, is just be honest with yourself. You want to do it. You know what I mean? Because if you really didn't, you know what I mean? God is willing to help you. He'll give you the strength to walk away from that. In that moment, that's where I experienced deliverance. Weeks became months, and then months became a few years. You know what I mean? And I was almost in awe of what God has done. And it's not like I could tell a person right in front of me, this is what I did to get delivered from an addiction of pornography. This is how I did it. You know, it wasn't in my own power. God literally took the desire out of my life. It was a miracle. It was a miracle. That's the only thing the only way I could explain it. Like God literally took the desire from my heart. I ain't saying that the devil still tried. You know,
Right,
the devil
right.
still tried to draw me back into it. But in those moments, I found the strength in God. Like I rebuked that spirit of pornography in Jesus' name. I'm not going back into that place again. You know, and that deliverance really carried on.
Good. So I'm just going to kind of run through a couple things. And so this was your moment of clarity. You kind of opened your eyes to, I need to do things right. So I'm assuming that from this point on, then you did do things right. You restored your marriage, your relationship with your wife.
Yeah.
She came back. And then, so from this point on, then do you guys have a better marriage from that moment? And then you guys get out of California? Like what happened there?
We experienced a certain breakthrough in a lot of areas. We were more vulnerable with each other because for the next few months, we started to communicate long distance in a way that we never did in our relationship. And through that, we became more tender. We saw the need, you know, the physical need and the spiritual need of having each other and being together, you know, and so because of that, it softened our hearts in a whole new level in our marriage. And we worked our way back into reconciling our family together. And so while she was there, she was focusing on her love for Jesus, and I was focusing on my own love with Jesus, you know, and it came to, we prayed about it for that day when we finally, I'll take her back in. I'll fly back to the East Coast, take her and fly her back home to Cali with me. You know, we prayed for that day. And then when that day did happen, you know, I could tell that, man, there's still a lot of things that are glooming. They're still lingering around. And so we're on our year 2 in Cali, year 3, and then year 4, and all those years. We knew the type of issues that we were having in our marriage. We knew the anger. We knew the so much rejection going on, so much pain in our past that we were just taking it out on each other. And all the fighting, it stayed. You know, it really did, but it wasn't like how it was there in our first year. But my military leadership, they would still get involved. They would still take me out whenever things got rocky. They'll put me in the crummy motel room again. And, restraining orders were really routine in my life in those years, you know. And, I mean, 4th year was last year. So we're really not far from that. You know, my last year in the military was just a little over a year ago. And so what I tell people all the time, just about a year ago, I was on the brink of divorce. You know, though we claim to have experienced deliverance, and mind you, I did backslide in my addiction to pornography. You know, that though I experienced this, there was a deployment in there, and I thought was really gonna take a hit in my walk with God. I didn't. You know, I stayed pure all throughout. Being alone all day, not having my wife, I stayed pure. You know, and so when I came back home, like, man, I'm really set free, bro. I'm really, really set free. You know, up until a few months later, we get in a big fight again. I get restraining order. I can't go to my house, and I'm in this crime motel. I'm alone. That's when the temptation it seemed stronger, and I fell for the first time that from the time that God delivered me. That's the first time I fell, And then another year passes, I don't watch, and another year passes, and I do fall again. It's the same reason, because marriage is rocky. I'm just doing it to rebel even more, But it was about a year ago. That's when I really said, God, I really do need help in this aspect. And so we leave the military, or just that year, towards the end of my military contract, I gave her divorce papers. I was like, here it is. I'm done. And
so it was you giving it to her, not her.
It was me giving it to her. I went to the county to grab the packet. And even then, I stayed in the car outside the county for hours, man, just trying to find the strength, or just trying to find the power to step out and grab because I knew I didn't want to do it deep down. But in my rebellion and my stubbornness, I was like, the devil was I was listening to the devil, and I was trying to follow the devil. That's what I was trying to do. I was trying to follow his ways, you know what I mean? And but I did it anyways. I grabbed it and I threw her. I gave her the papers at home, and she was like, "What are these?" And I'm like, "They're divorce papers." I'm like, "What are you talking about? I'm not divorcing you. That's do you hear what you're saying right now? That's sin before God. I'm not gonna break my covenant before God. Praise God for godly women. You know what I mean? Because in that moment, my wife really didn't want to divorce me. She wanted to keep the marriage going for the sake of our relationship with God. And I'm over here, like, deep down, I really don't want to do it, but I was just being led by the enemy, bro. But we found there was then I started getting counseling for my anger. I really started to seek help, however much help or wherever the help came from, whether through the military, the mental health there, my pastor that I was in there. And I started reading books on anger management. I started reading books on this and this and that. And, and it's true, because the Bible says that the truth shall set you free. And in that moment, I took in a lot of truth, and through that, I was able to, and my wife, this was a year ago, my wife, she was willing to stay with me and work through with me. It wasn't easy on her. And I remember I could see how it messed her up mentally. Like, this guy really was trying to walk out on me. The level of rejection that she experienced, though I'm trying to love on her now, trying to reconcile things. I live with a brother in the Lord of mine that's a few blocks away for a few months, because I didn't want to put myself back in the same situation without being ready. You know what I mean? I wanted to just find healing, find restoration in my faith before I move in. But I moved in, I think February last year. I moved back in with her. And though I did experience some healing in the anger that I was experiencing, I'm trying to love on her now. I'm trying to reestablish her trust in me. I was like, babe, all the weapons that I had towards you, I'm laying them down. You could choose to hurt me, but I refuse to hurt you back. You know what I mean? I'm taking it all, whatever it is. If you call me names, if you hurt me physically, whatever you do, you know what I mean? Regardless of what it is, I'm not going to hurt you back anymore. And even through all of that, I could see that my wife struggled. She struggled with taking my love. She struggled with feeling loved in the marriage, and my contract was up, and I had already made up my mind I'm going to leave the military. I'm like, man, this ain't really setting up my family for success in terms of God's kingdom. You know what I mean? I being away from the house for 8 months due to deployment and all the personal struggles I have in my walk with God, it's a perfect storm to sin.
Yes. Yeah.
It really is. And I started experiencing it in deployment, towards the end, and I'm like, wow, what is going on with my mind? You know what I mean? I'm like, man, I can't put myself in that situation again before I actually commit adultery.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mind battles.
Yeah, the mind battles. And so,
what made you guys decide Texas?
You know, we were always drawn to Texas.
Have you ever been here?
I've only been here because of boot camp in Lackland.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but she's never been. And so the thing about the military, right before you leave, they give you one last chance to move anywhere in the country on them. They'll move your stuff. They give you plane tickets if you choose to drive. They pay for the mileage. They pay for gas. They pay for per diem and all that stuff. And so we had the option to land anywhere in the country, Alaska, Maryland, Iowa, Idaho, Wyoming, whatever it was. You know, we did research. We really did. We wanted some mountains. We could have moved to Montana. And we wanted some good old guns. We go to Texas. You know what I mean? Some good old freedom. And so we've been so deprived, I guess, of so much freedom there in Cali, especially with the way they handled the pandemic. You know, they shut down everything. There's so much restriction on everything else. And so we were like,
that Newsom's a little dictator. So
oh man, bro, there was this one election that they had on our last year there, and it gave me a slight of hope because there's this man called Elder something. Larry Elder. And they did a recall on Newsom. And for you to even do a recall, you got to have enough petitions. Yeah. And the petitions were just a landslide, bro. It was like, oh, okay, Newsom's really about to get recalled. And so the recall election did happen. And it just so happened that it wasn't like that. And I don't know. I'm not here to, you know, spew out conspiracies, but I just let
they stole it. They rigged it.
Yeah, I just let y'all think whatever y'all think.
I think it's a combination of some corruption, but also there's a bunch of idiots in California that actually want that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They want all that dictatorship and control over their life. But okay, so let's jump ahead. So looking at the timeline, you said February last year when you guys, you kind of crawled back to your wife and like, no, let's do this. And then earlier you said April's when you came into the church. So it was only a couple months between then and there. Yeah. So were you guys, you guys were new to San Antonio? Were you guys trying to find a church? Were you guys praying? Like, how did you guys end up in the Potter's house with Pastor Camilo?
Yeah, there was when we first moved into San Antonio, that's one of the first things that I wanted to prioritize for my family. You know, that now that the main reason why I left the military was to solely live for God. I wasn't living for God in the military. The Word of God says live by faith and not by sight. I was living by sight, and it convicted me. And so I had that mentality getting out of the military, moving into this new life. I saw it as a refresh. I saw it as hitting a restart button. And when we first moved in, I remember I fasted all week. I fixed my eyes on Jesus and whatever it was. You know, the very first Sunday, I prioritized that, hey, we're going to go to church. I don't care what church it is. We're going to go to church and check it out, see if it's it. You know, so for a few weeks, we were church hunting. You know, we've been accustomed to these big churches. So that's where we mainly went. And but there was this one time that, you know, in the middle of church hunting, we found a church way out there in, I think it's off of 410 in Fredericksburg, somewhere out there, like 30 minutes away from us. And, you know, the sermon was good, you know, but it's the same old mega church dynamic where you just go there, listen. If it's a good sermon, it's a good sermon. If it's not, it's not. And then you come home, do your own thing.
There's no relationship. There's no
fellowship. There's,
Yeah, exactly.
So you guys were searching for more. Okay, so if I remember correctly, you found out about the church through an outreach, a door-to-door, right? I think it was Diego.
Yeah.
Knocked on your door and talked to you guys, right?
Yes.
And so what did you guys think?
So when that moment happened, you know, I welcomed it. I wasn't resistant at all. I actually had a Jesus shirt on, and he was I remember Diego, and he had he had a friend. To me, they looked like kids, you know, just passing out invitations to church. And I'm like, okay. And I heard him out, and I could tell, like, Diego was, he was stammering a little bit in his words, you know, but I wasn't there to really, like, question or anything. Like I said, I welcomed them. And I remember when I grabbed the invitation, they left. And then I look back out again. I open the door. I look out in the street, and I see a gaggle of people. I see a huge group of people just walking down the block. And I'm like, man, that's the whole church right there. And the last pastor I had in Cali, right before we left, he counseled my wife and I for the last time. And he said, Glad, when you look for a church, make sure that they're following the Great Commission. Which is funny because I look back in that church and I'm like, man, where was that Great Commission?
You didn't even have it.
But anyways, I heard that, I heard in my mind as I was staring at that group, and I'm like, wow, that is the Great Commission right there, right? Just to step out and share the goodness of Jesus. And so I turned the flyer and it was Spanish. And at that point, my mother-in-law was with us. She only speaks Spanish. And I want her to receive from God as well here in Texas. We've been going to only English-speaking churches. And so I'm like, okay, maybe in this church, she'll hear a good Spanish sermon. And so that's the reason why we went. And the next Sunday morning, that was on a Saturday morning. And Sunday morning comes around, we get ready. You know what I mean? I got the flyer in my pocket. I Google map the address. It ain't too far. I'm like, wow, it's 4 or 5 minutes away, And so we go there, and it's a big old parking lot. And I'm like, man, where are all the cars, And we can't even see no signs. But for some reason, we found our way.
You found your way in.
We found our way in, And I think in the second story door, we have this pastor put this sticker,
yes.
door sticker. From the outside, you could barely tell that it's there because I think the door's tinted or whatever. But it's not as on your face kind of deal. But I locked eyes on it. And I'm like, I think that's it. We go up, we start reading the times. I'm like, okay, we're here on the right time. They should be starting pretty soon.
Yeah, where's the cars?
Where are the cars? And so I open the door, it's a hallway. I'm like, okay, hallway, nice hallway. Let's walk in. I see this little picture frame, printed paper right there, right in front of us. Turn left to go to the Potter's house. So we turn left. I got my son with me, my wife's following, and her mother-in-law. And as we're walking towards that door, I see this girl just out the hallway, just she pops her head out.
Alyssa.
Yeah, and then she pops back in. And I'm like, did y'all see that? And mind you, like, you could hear a pin drop.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm like, what is going on? And so we continue in. I'm like, okay, I see the sign. I think this is it. You know what I mean? We walk in. We turn we turn into the door. We see the whole family right there. We see Pastor Camilo, Miss Lulu, Adam, and Alyssa. You know what I mean? They welcome us warmly. You know what I mean? And I'm like, hey, we're here from yesterday. They gave us a flyer yesterday. And he was like, oh, that's nice. I'm like, where's everybody? Where's that whole group that I saw?
You're it.
Where's that group, man? And Pastor was like, oh, that's the mother church. They were helping us out, pass flyers. And this is actually our second service. And I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. And we sit down, and Pastor starts with service. And the worship wasn't smooth. You know what I mean? Granted, it's second service. You know what I mean? And it was one thing that I've never seen. It's something that I'm not accustomed to. And so I'm trying to sing, trying to worship, but everything was so new to me. Everything was really different than what I've been used to.
Yes.
And so just the fact that it's just us there alone, was already a big pressure that was going on in my heart and in my mind. And so we get through the worship, and then we get through everything. We sit down, and pastor is preaching. I'm like, man, this is a good sermon right here. You know what I mean? And I can still remember what pastor preached. He was preaching about having a foundation built on Jesus, and everything was speaking into my life in that
timely
moment.
Message.
It was so timely, I tell you, because, being in a new state, being a new, trying to pursue God now. I just left the military. I don't even know what job I'm going to do next. I had HVAC lined up, but I didn't even have that already working for me yet. You know what I mean? There's so many uncertainty up ahead, you know, and yet there's this sermon that says, whatever it is, build your life on Jesus. Man, it spoke so loudly in my heart because
Praise
leading up, even before we left California, I was like, God, I really need a church that you want for us. Put us in a church that you need us in. Put us in a godly community, a community that could really take my wife in, the good, the bad, and ugly, and help us in our walk, you know? And so right when God told me this is the church, which was that service, during that sermon, God told me, this is this church. This is the church you've been praying about. And at first it was hard to believe because it wasn't what I had envisioned.
Yes. Yeah. You're all.
Yeah, it really wasn't.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But that sermon, it spoke so loudly into my heart that it was undeniable. That when God said, this is it, I was like, but God, you know, what about this? What about that? This is it. You know, a few weeks later, you know, even when we started going a little bit more consistently, I still had to fight it a little bit. You know what I mean? But God kept telling me, just trust me in this. Trust me in this. Trust me in this. You're in a new place. You know what I mean? Not just physically, but in your spiritual walk. You know, you're trying to live wholeheartedly for God. Just trust me in this process. You know, and I remember the next service, we missed it. I think it's Sunday night, we didn't go. We never were Sunday night goers, ever. And we never really been a part of a church that did have Sunday evenings. And so that to me was foreign. And that to me was a drag. In the beginning, it really was a drag.
Yeah, we were just there.
Yeah, it really was a drag. And Wednesday, the next Wednesday we didn't come. And the next Sunday, we didn't even come. I was like, I remember when we got home, my family and I were talking. I was just listening to the ladies, my mother-in-law and my wife, and they're like, oh, that was a weird church. They're like, that was a weird church. And I'm like, I felt weirded out too. And I'd never been in a church that was just me.
Yes. Yeah.
You know? And so the next Sunday we didn't go. We actually went back to that mega church. We went back to that mega church. But even inside that mega church, God was telling me that this ain't it.
This isn't the one that I have for you.
It.
While I was there, I was thinking of Pastor Camilo and his big old head. I was thinking about Pastor Camilo and what they're doing over there, how they're doing, you know, and they were in my heart the next few weeks. And I remember my wife and I, we went to a government place to get our IDs in New Braunfels. And we leave and we're like, man, we got some time right now. What are we going to do? And I looked at the time and my mother-in-law had my son. So we're like, all right, I could either take you out on a date or we do something fun. I look at the time like, actually, that church is having a Wednesday evening service. You know, and if we drive there right now, we'll be right on time. If anything, we'll be a few minutes early perfectly. And so we're like, man, let's visit it. You know, so we go back again. You know, I was actually wearing a tank top and I didn't feel weird. I felt weird going into the church just with a tank top. So I went to, I think CVS or Walgreens to buy me a shirt. And it had a big old Texas on it. Because I saw the first service. There, pastor was all suited up.
Yes, yeah.
Not a tie and all that. And I'm like, I don't think that, you know, that's how they roll. Because in Cali, we would go to church in tank top and chanclas and shorts, you know. And, so I had to buy that. But we went to second service. And from there, it was like, man, I think we exchanged phone numbers. You know, and from there, pastor would always keep in touch with me. He would send me texts and find out that they don't live far from me. You know, all this time, we're like, man, we need help. We need help. We need to make sure we find help because if something happens in our marriage, we need someone to run to.
Yes, yes.
You know what I mean? When we found out that my wife has Miss Lulu just a block away, we're like, babe, you can run to her whenever you want. Like what better confirmation, you know what I mean? So for me, it was, I was ready to step into it, but I could feel the resistance. I could feel the questioning on my wife's side because she's thinking about Hosea. She's thinking about having Hosea in a community that he can also grow up with other kids, not just by himself. You know, and that's one thing that we're praying for. That's one of the big prayers that we have right now. You know, but that's one thing that I saw my wife was battling with. And I didn't push her. I didn't try to. And all the while I'm keeping in touch with Pastor. I remember those phone calls. He would call me at night. And it got to a point where it seemed like my pastor was just selling me the church. And I'm like, if you know me, I can be skeptic at times. You know, I don't just give in. And I would tell this to Pastor. I was like, bro, like, I can't just jump into this without really knowing that it's from God. Like, I heard him speak, but confirmation after confirmation is what I'm really looking for at this point. You know what I mean?
You keep putting out those fleeces, and God's like, okay, Glad.
Yeah.
Okay, Glad. Okay, Glad.
How much more clear do you want it? And I remember even the first service, after the sermon, I approached Pastor. I walked to him. And later on, he told me, like, man, I never had anybody walk towards me like that. Usually, I'm the one walking towards the people. You know, I'm the one who confronted Pastor. Like, Pastor, that was a great sermon, bro. It's really what I needed. And then right after, it's like, yeah, trying to fellowship. They ask us. I look at my family like, wow. You know, right off the bat, they're ready to really get to know us. And so we eat, and that's when, you know, I get to hear a little bit from my pastor and hear his testimony. I'm like, wow, me and my wife, we're just blown away at the work that God has done in their family.
Yes,
and
yes.
That's something that you cannot deny. That's something that if you're looking to see if this is it, if this is a godly man that you want to follow, you know, something like that happening in their life, you can't deny that that's a move of God.
Yes, yes.
You know what I mean? And I've been pastored by so many, a handful of pastors. They got degrees left and right. You go in their office, they got certificates here, certificates, degrees there on their wall. But when I'm being pastored by this one man, has no type of education, but through the Holy Spirit, I saw a certain dynamic, and not just through my pastor Camilo, but the way that our fellowship runs. And that's when God gave me a revelation through this. You know, one thing that I really love about our fellowship is that the anointing of the Holy Spirit, you know, is strong. Because I don't care how much degrees you have, man. If you don't have the anointing of the Holy Spirit, the Holy Spirit backing you up, your counsel ain't hitting me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Your counsel ain't being straight enough. You're trying to flatter me.
Yeah. Your fancy words, that's not what I need. I need the Holy Spirit to convict me.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And so that's what I saw, man. And the way we disciple people in this church is what I love. You know, we don't send people to seminary. We don't send people to have more education. I'm not saying education is bad in and of itself. You know what I mean?
No, correct.
But being a minister of God, I believe that first and foremost, you need the fulfilling of the Holy Spirit. You know what I mean? You need the Holy Spirit's help, because through that, you find your skills. You'll find your craft. You'll find everything that God will equip you.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
You can't
if
equip
you're willing.
yourself.
Yes.
And so, but anyways.
So,
yeah.
So after that, I mean, you guys got pretty much locked in pretty soon, right? You guys, I mean, I remember seeing you guys pretty regularly.
Yeah.
Going to the church, and obviously, you know, the new dynamic, the accessibility of Pastor and Lulu, you know what I mean? And them spending their time to get to know you and you to get to know them.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure it was I'm sure it was a help in your marriage, right? Kind of seeing, because everybody who knows Pastor Camilo and Lulu's,
we know their
testimony is pretty crazy, right? Like they had a rough marriage, but God really helped them out a lot. Yeah. I'm sure that was a big influence for you guys. I mean, you can see the growth for listening to what you were saying, how you guys were before you came to the church, and seeing you guys now. That's why I was kind of blown away by your guys' notes here, because like you guys always seem like you guys had it together, you know what I mean? And now though, like I can see, you know, that you're in doing music, You know, you're in the ministry. I know you did your healing crusade a few months back, which was, you know, really powerful. I was blown away by your healing crusade sermon. I was like, wow, like that was anointing. You know what I mean? Like it was something that was a lot more advanced than what I thought it was going to be. And you came at it from a different direction. Like it showed growth, and it showed like, wow, God is really moving in your guys' lives. You know what I mean? Like you can see from what little interaction we had with you guys. You know what I mean? And so I think I think your testimony is pretty powerful in just hearing it all. And that I think you especially are a good example of knowing God and hearing God. But like you mentioned before, having one foot in and one foot out, where like, I mean, God spoke to you throughout your life, and you would go through these moments where you would make a bad decision and you'd feel convicted, and God would like reveal to you like, hey dude, like, what are you doing? I have a better path for your life. And then you would compromise, right? Like a lot of these decisions are the compromises that you made in your life, in your faith, right? And it kind of seems like you were always, even though you had that relationship with God, you had a somewhat understanding, you were still going through the drama, you were still going through the depression, through the heartache, because of your stubbornness, because of your compromising. And then it seems like once you finally found a church that you found that is truly biblical, that has convictions, that has standards, makes stands, has accountability for the pastors, for you. They have the interpersonal relationship, like, hey, you're going to get to know us, we're going to get to know you. Kind of seems like you guys just kind of flourished because this is what you've been wanting. Seems like this is what you've been after. Yeah. And now that you're finally in this position, it's like God is like, finally, this is it. Yes. No compromises. Now you can flourish and grow, and I mean, you can see it. You know what I mean? Man,
it was, I could see it, bro. Just even in my marriage, you know what I mean? There's that, though it's just a little over a year ago, to some degree, it feels so far. But
it's like also,
when we sit down with pastor, he has to remind us, hey, at the end of the day, that still wasn't so far. There's some things that we still need to work on, which is true.
Yes.
You know what I mean? But in just 1 year, man, just in 1 year, to see what God can do in a life that's fully surrendered, it's not going to take long for God to do something. A lot of times it delays because of our stubbornness, because of it's us. It's not more so God. God is ready today. Today's the day of salvation. It ain't tomorrow. It ain't next year. It's today. It's us that put it off. It's us that delay it. And I can't be any more blessed to be in a place I'm in now, because for so long I've always felt this certain anointing over my life that God was calling me to pastor. And even before we went into this church, the topic of pastoring was somehow being brought up, either from friends, from family. And I remember a time when my wife said, or my brother-in-law, Salvador, he's like, oh, Glad, I could see you becoming a pastor. It was in California. And his sister, my wife, started laughing. He's like, am I glad being a pastor? Yeah. You know what I mean? Especially her knowing all of the stuff I've done, you know what I mean, to her. You know what I mean? And so I felt that anointing in my life. And that's one thing that was clear to me going into this church, was that God wants to use my life. And I couldn't really catch the vision of other churches when it comes to them using other people, because they preach seminary, they preach, hey, degrees this, degrees that. I ain't got time for that. I'm a full-time father. I'm a full-time husband. I need to provide. I can't do that when I'm in studies. You know, I'm just trying to scrape for a living. You know what I mean? Like physically, I can't do that. You know, I can't see that happening. And so for so long, I stirred away from that, because I thought to become a pastor, I had to do it that way. And so when I came into, I remember, I think it was the next week or next few weeks, pastor invites me to the Marbach church for a men's discipleship class. And left and right, I'm meeting, hey, I'm Pastor so-and-so. Hey, I'm Pastor Leonard. I met your brother then. I never forgot about him ever since. Hey, I'm Pastor Alex. I'm Pastor this. I'm like, everybody I meet is a pastor. Do they make everybody a pastor here? And for so many years, I put that in the back burner because I just didn't see it happening. And part of me, you know, like, I don't even think that's really what God wants me to do. You know what I mean? There's so many layers to that why I put it off.
Yeah.
But it started resurfacing the more I stayed in the Potter's house.
I remember, I don't know if you remember, but we had a conversation at, I think it was after one of the revivals last year at the Mama Church, at Pastor Ben's church. And he was talking about this. You were struggling with the call,
Yeah.
you know, for pastor. And you're just like, man, I don't know if that's for me or what. And so you were asking me questions and stuff. And yeah, I could see the struggle in you at that moment. You know what I mean? And then, you know, soon after that is when you fully surrendered, and then now here you are. You know what I mean?
I remember when, I think it was last year, August, that's when I really started to start to deal with it, you know, and it took me sitting down with my pastor. I'm like, hey, pastor, I think I'm called right now, man. I think God wants me to preach. You know, I love Jesus, bro. I'll do anything for God. And, but I need confirmation. I've always heard this thought, you're going to preach. Because I remember walking in college in the campus and picking classes for the next semester. And in the back of my mind, I'd be like, man, watch me become a pastor anyway. I was 19. I'm 26. Watch me become a pastor. And I laugh it off myself. I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, right. I mean, for that to happen, some guys got to move.
Yeah.
Look, God's moving. But in August.
Here's your fleece. There you go again.
Yeah, exactly. And August, that's when I think I sat down with pastor, and I was really dealing with him. Like, God, is this really what you want me to do? You know what I mean? And I brought it up to pastor, and then we had that revival with Pastor Juan Uribe. I think that was in September. For the whole month of August, I'm dealing with it, you know, and I know that I came to that revival hungry, bro. I was in that prayer room praying, you know, and something was bound to happen, you know, and he gave me that word, you know, and I started bawling my eyes out because I knew right before I stood up, right before he called for the altar call, I was so nervous. I felt like my name was about to be called for like, I felt so tense in my body for whatever reason.
Yeah.
It wasn't like the sermon was directly for me. It wasn't like anything. It wasn't like I was sent, the whole world was revolving around me. But for some reason, I was like, man, I feel like I'm about to be called up. I played basketball in high school, and whenever the coach like, Glad, you're going in. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, that's me, okay. I felt like that. I felt like that moment was about to happen right then and there.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, it did. You know, that's when he calls me and like, I see you preaching in many nations. You know what I mean? And all this time asking Pastor, I need a confirmation. I need a confirmation that I can undeniably think that this is God. You know what I mean? And I was like, man, this man don't even know me. I don't even know.
Yeah.
I've never met him. I never even talked to him personally, you know? And so right then and there, I started crying because I knew everything just clicked. Everything just clicked. So much clarity moving forward those months. I knew that after the 6 months, we'll go into the discipleship, into ministry. That was a no question. You know, Pastor wanted us to pray for the standards, hey, to really live for it. We were ready, you know what I mean? And I knew that all the Healing Crusade was the next thing for me. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I had the sermon ready before the Healing Crusade. And so from here on out, so much clarity while my marriage is thriving. The marriage I'm in now is in a place that's never been. And every single month, it seems like we're hitting levels, we're hitting strides that we've never had before. And when I say that a year ago feels so far off, it really does feel so far off, you know, in terms of how much God has done in just 1 year. And I tell people, I tell myself, I tell my wife, this is just the beginning.
Yes.
When I look at the church and it's just me and pastor's family, this is just the beginning.
Yes.
And I'm blessed to see this church as it is right now, because when there's people there, I get to say I was there. I get to say that I've seen my pastor from day 2. You know what I mean? That I locked arms with him. I helped my pastor, you know. And one thing that God really revealed to me was that you prayed for a pastor for so many years. Now that I've given you it, now you have to let him pastor you.
Yes.
You know, that's one thing that I see many people struggle that come into our church. You know, they resist that headship. You know, and one thing that I try to challenge myself is like, I need to come under headship, because for God to help me lead, I need to be led first. You know what I mean? A man that leads, or a man that is not being led cannot lead. You know what I mean? And so that's one thing that that's one thing that I hold myself accountable when it comes to my relationship with my pastor, is because the pastors I've had, I questioned them, I doubted them, I tried to assert some form of dominance, whether through theology, whether through verbal interaction, where somehow I'm not a big old guy, I can't assert dominance physically over Camilo, but you know what I mean? One thing that God had to tell me was like, hey, you got to stop that. Humble yourself. See this man as a man that I've appointed over your life. You know what I mean? And treat him as such. And that's one thing that because ultimately, if God wants, once I'm in his shoes, I don't want to be in that position where the disciples are just.
Yeah, where you're getting you.
Yeah, I'm getting me.
Yeah.
And so one thing that he's instilling in my heart as a disciple now, be the disciple that you want your disciples to be in the future.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And so I'm like, all right, God, you better hold true, because I'm trying. I'm trying.
Well, I mean, it's awesome to see and hear, you know, what God is doing in your guys' lives and your marriage.
Yes.
We're excited to see what he does, you know what I mean? The years to come.
Yeah.
I'm going to cut it off here, though.
Yeah.
Because we got to get your wife on here.
Oh, my
It's
goodness.
too late, man.
It's so late. I'm sorry.
No. This was good. This was very good.
No, it was good. It was good testimony. You had some good stuff to say.
Any healing crusades coming up for you?
No, nothing.
Not yet? Okay.
Not yet.
Okay.
I was able to preach a few months ago in our church.
Oh.
And man, that was powerful.
Nice.
To me, that was like a victory for me. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I remember the devil was trying to not make it happen. You know, but
coming against you. Yeah.
So then just to close it out, are there any last words of advice that you would like to give to somebody that maybe had a similar situation as you growing up? Say they're a young man or somebody that
like in the church.
Just somebody that might relate to what
your
you've
story.
gone through. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, what would you tell that person?
I'm not trying to be original right now. It's something that Pastor Ben said in the podcast. And when he was asked something that to give in terms of longevity in ministry, and he said, keep your heart right. You know what I mean? And that's one thing that honestly I can just give to people. Just keep your heart right. If it's sin, run away from it. Follow God wholeheartedly. Love God with all your heart. Love God with all your mind, strength. Because through that, you know what I mean, God will move. He'll guide you where you need to go. If you have love for God, your compass is towards God. You know what I mean? A lot of times we get caught up with theology. We get caught up with doctrine. We get caught up with oh, this church runs this way, that church runs that way. Nah, do you love God or not? Do you have love for people? You know what I mean? It all stems to where the heart is, you know, and my only advice is, man, find a way, find your love for Jesus. You know, find your love for Jesus and then keep your heart right. You know, and through that, man, God will take you in places where we can't even see right now.
Yes.
Yeah. Amen. Okay, well, thank you for joining us.
Yes,
Yes,
thank
sir.
you, Glad.
Very good, very powerful.
Yes.
Thank you for watching. Just join us next time. Thanks.
Yes. Bye.
After that moment, I remember just being very perverted in my mind. I remember I felt like my innocence was ripped away. I remember feeling very unclean, feeling dirty, and without value. And I'm just gonna take a break.
No, go ahead.
So yeah, so after that, I remember becoming very sexual, like having this sexual rise in me, or just wanting to do things.
And this is as a young girl.
As a young girl, like
So-
5, 6, 7,
Wow.
8.
That's crazy. So
Nope.
take your time.
I just remember as a little girl just wanting someone to look up to, just wanting someone strong to protect me.
Where was your dad? Like, obviously your mom knew about this. She got upset about it. She wasn't able to keep this kid away from you because the way you guys were living, apartments. Yeah. But what was your dad's reaction to this?
So my dad, my mom actually, like years later, when I was a little older, my mom told me that she told my dad, but he didn't believe her. So I had stabbed my mom, and this is the first time I cried out to God. I remember going up to my room, closing the door, and being really scared because my mom's going to kill me. She's going to kill me. Something bad, terrible is going to happen to me. And so I remember just crying because I felt so bad of what I did, and so much shame. I wanted to die. I didn't want to be here, because I saw no love in my life, and I was so frustrated because I wanted that. I wanted my parents to love each other and to love me and stick up for me, and so I wasn't getting this. And so I remember just crying out to God in my room. And I started to receive the gospel, and she started opening the Bible to me and started to pour the scriptures to me. And I remember like seeing the words of God and just being like, wow, God said that? Like God said, if you lie, you're going to go to hell? What? I'm really going to go to hell, Like I deserve hell. And so I was I was scared, honestly. I was like, man, what do I do? And so my sister had shared to me, Jesus did it on the cross. He took your sin. And I saw her. Like, she was so supportive when I went. Because I know I had, I put her through so much, just stuff. And, I did stuff to her that was messed up. And so, I'm very happy that she was able to go and support me. And we started going together on Sundays, and we're there receiving, and I'm seeing her answer altar call and her get delivered.
Amen.
Like her just, like I would see her just crying in the altar, just crying because she's been through her own stuff. She has her own testimony. She's the way that she is because of whatever happened to her when she was little, and so she looks at me, she's like, dang, Glad changed. He looked good. And when she said, I was like, girl, I don't buy him. So I had to make it obvious, like, girl, you.
Dibs, I got dibs.
Yeah, because, it be crazy now in these generations. You got to claim your fish, So I felt like God put me in a sticky situation, And so that's the backstory, y'all. So, gotta make yourself clear sometimes. But anyways, I remember one night, I don't know if it was the night before the abortion or something like that, but I was hearing a voice saying, kill it. I turned off the lights, getting ready to go to bed, and I hear a voice in my room saying, kill it, kill it, kill it. And
oh my goodness.
Yeah, and I'm like, who is saying that? That's not
that
me.
demon that you summoned with the Ouija board.
And so when I hear that, I sit up on the side of my bed, and this voice comes out of me, and it says, devil, get away from me. I'm not gonna kill this child. I'm gonna have this child. And when I said that, I was like, did I just say that? And I started